Hello everyone. Welcome to Dead Time Stories. I know many of you enjoy listening to these videos as you fall asleep. So before you drift off, I'd love for you to leave a comment letting me know where in the world you're tuning in from. And if you're enjoying the story, don't forget to like and subscribe. Alright, now let's get comfortable, relax, and dive into tonight's story. The rain had been falling for hours, a relentless curtain of water that blurred the road into something dreamlike and shifting. David squinted through the windshield of his old Honda Civic, wipers thudding back and forth with maddening regularity. His phone had long since lost service, leaving the GPS frozen on a map that no longer updated. The highway signs, rusted, leaning, and nearly swallowed by vines, offered little reassurance. He hadn't passed another car in nearly an hour. When the neon sign appeared out of the downpour, he felt an almost childlike relief. The Crosswind Motel buzzed faintly in the storm, one of the letters hanging at a drunken angle. Its glow shimmered on the slick asphalt, a beacon of weary comfort. David pulled into the cracked lot, tires crunching over loose gravel and puddles. The building looked like it hadn't been renovated since the 70s, faded turquoise paint peeling from wooden siding, a row of doors tucked beneath a sagging overhang, and a flickering office light struggling against the dark. Inside the office, the air smelled faintly of mildew and burnt coffee. Behind the counter stood an older man with paper-thin skin and hollow eyes. He wore a cardigan that might once have been maroon, now dulled into a tired brown. His voice rasped like dry leaves when he spoke. "Storm caught you too, huh?" the man said, sliding a clipboard forward. "Road ahead's been washed out for years. Best you stay the night." David hesitated, pen hovering over the guest book. The words "washed out for years" snagged in his mind, but exhaustion and rain pressed harder. He scrawled his name, pushed cash across the counter, and took the key the man offered. Brass, heavy, with a chipped plastic tag labeled Room 6. The room itself was cleaner than expected, at least on the surface. The bedspread was stiff with detergent, the lamp buzzed when he turned it on, and a single painting of a windmill hung crooked above the dresser. He dropped his bag, kicked off wet shoes, and lay back, the storm outside a steady lullaby. But just as he began to drift, a sound stirred him, slow, dragging footsteps pacing directly above his ceiling. David froze, his eyes tracing the stained ceiling as the footsteps dragged back and forth. At first, he thought it must be another guest, maybe someone restless, pacing in their room. But when he'd pulled in, every parking space had been empty. No cars but his own. The sound paused. The silence stretched so long he began to think he'd imagined it, until 3 heavy thuds struck directly overhead, as if someone had dropped to their knees. Dust sifted down from the ceiling fan. "Jesus!" David whispered, sitting up. He tried to laugh it off, maybe old pipes, or a raccoon nesting in the rafters, but the noise was deliberate, measured, human. He slipped on his shoes again, grabbed his phone even though it showed no service, and stepped out into the rain. The lot was still empty, the office light glowing weakly. The roofline of the motel was flat, no second story, no attic window. There was nowhere for footsteps to be. A cold spike of unease threaded his spine. He ducked back inside, dripping on the faded carpet, and checked the bathroom. Nothing but cracked tiles and a sink that coughed rusty water. The closet was empty. When he pressed his ear to the ceiling, the footsteps returned, slower now, almost deliberate, as though whoever was up there knew he was listening. David backed away, heart hammering. He considered going back to the office, demanding an explanation, but something about the old man's hollow stare made him hesitate. Instead, he locked the door, slid the chain across, and sat on the edge of the bed. Hours passed. The storm eased, then returned in sheets. The footsteps never fully stopped. Sometimes they skittered quickly across the ceiling. Other times they paused directly above him, accompanied by the faint groan of weight pressing down. Near 3 a.m., sleep finally overcame him despite the noise. He dreamed of long, waterlogged hallways, motel doors yawning open into blackness, and a pale figure watching him from the end of each corridor. When he woke, sunlight leaked through the thin curtains. For a moment, he felt relief. It had only been a strange, storm-addled night. He swung his legs off the bed, rubbed his face, and opened the door. The parking lot was empty. The neon sign was gone. The office, too, the doorframe led only to crumbling drywall, as though it had never been anything else. And in the damp dirt by his car, a line of bare footprints circled the vehicle again and again. David stood frozen on the cracked pavement, the morning air heavy with the smell of wet earth. The footprints were fresh, their edges darkened with moisture. Each one was narrow, long, with toes splayed unnaturally wide. They circled his car in a looping, obsessive pattern, as if someone, or something, had walked around it for hours. He forced himself closer, crouching low. The impressions were too sharp, too clean to be washed away by last night's storm. He touched one. The dirt was cold, almost clammy, as though it still held the imprint of a body that wasn't quite human. "Okay," he muttered, voice cracking. "Okay, screw this." He yanked open his car door, tossed his bag into the passenger seat, and jammed the key into the ignition. The engine groaned, turned over once, and died. He tried again, pressing the accelerator. The same grinding whine. Third time, nothing, just silence, the kind that swallowed his breath. David gripped the wheel, willing himself not to panic. "It's just flooded. It's just the rain." But when he looked up, the motel stretched longer than before. What had been maybe a dozen rooms the night before now sprawled across the lot in both directions, their doors crooked and sagging. Room numbers skipped erratically, 4, 6, 11, 18, etched in tarnished brass, none of them in order. The storm clouds had broken, but the sunlight seemed wrong, too dim, as if filtered through dirty glass. He stepped out of the car, legs trembling, and started toward the office, or where it should have been. The doorway he'd used to check in now led into a hall he hadn't seen before, stretching impossibly deep. The scent of mildew was stronger, mixed with something sharp and metallic, like rust or blood. A voice rasped from inside. "Room 6! You shouldn't have stayed in room 6! David stumbled backward, but the hallway seemed to pull at him, the shadows inside bending like reaching hands. His phone buzzed suddenly in his pocket. He yanked it out, startled, and saw a single bar of service. A notification blinked, one new message. The sender was blank. No number, no name. Just the message. "Don't look behind you." David's breath caught in his throat. Against every instinct screaming inside him, he turned his head. And the old man from the office was standing inches away, his skin gray in the weak light, his mouth stretched too wide, as if he'd been waiting all along for David to break that rule. David stumbled back, nearly tripping over the uneven asphalt. The old man's eyes were no longer the watery, tired ones he remembered from check-in. They were black, flat, depthless, like pits carved into his face. His jaw hung slack, too far, the skin at the corners of his mouth split, and weeping thin lines of crimson. "You signed the book," the old man whispered, though his lips hardly moved. His voice came from deeper inside him, a guttural echo that seemed to vibrate the very air. "Your name belongs here now." David bolted. He sprinted down the row of doors, gravel crunching under his shoes, the air thick with damp heat. He glanced over his shoulder. Nothing. The man hadn't followed. But each time David looked forward again, the motel stretched longer, doors multiplying endlessly, their brass numbers warping, repeating, disappearing entirely. He stopped at one door labeled Room 19. The handle was warm, almost feverish under his palm. Against his better judgment, he shoved it open. Inside, the room was identical to his own. Same stiff bedspread, same crooked lamp, same windmill painting. But the air was thick, suffocating, as though the space itself resented his presence. On the bed sat a suitcase, his suitcase. Heart pounding, he unzipped it. Inside were clothes, yes, but not his. Faded children's pajamas. A woman's nightgown torn at the hem. And at the very bottom, folded with unnatural precision, was a piece of paper torn from the guest book. His name, scrawled in his own handwriting, smeared as if wet with tears. The lamp flickered. The footsteps above resumed, dragging, relentless. No, David hissed, shoving the suitcase away. This isn't real. I'm leaving. He burst back outside. The motel doors slammed shut one by one behind him in rapid succession. Bang, 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 until only his remained open, room 6 gaping like a wound. From within, he heard faint sobbing. It was a woman's voice. Broken. Begging. Please don't leave me here. David's blood ran cold. He gripped the frame, torn between flight and the pull of that voice. He'd never heard it before, yet it rang with something intimate, like he should have known her all his life. The sobbing stopped. Then, slowly, the voice said in perfect clarity, "Turn around, David." His fingers slipped from the frame. His body stiffened. Someone was standing right behind him. David's breath caught in his throat. He felt the weight of a presence pressing against the back of his neck, the air colder than the rain-soaked dawn around him. Every nerve screamed at him not to turn, but his body disobeyed. Slowly, as though pulled by invisible strings, his head turned. At first, there was nothing. Just a long stretch of motel corridor, doors warped and crooked in the half-light. Then, 10 feet away, a figure stepped into view. It was a woman, soaked as though she'd been walking in the storm all night. Her hair hung in clumps across her face, her dress clinging to her body in tattered sheets. Her bare feet left wet prints on the concrete that didn't fade, each step whispering like fabric dragged across stone. "David," she said softly. He staggered back, throat dry. How do you know my name?" She tilted her head, strands of hair parting just enough for him to glimpse pale skin, lips cracked and blue. Her eyes were hidden, but her voice carried the weight of familiarity. "You signed the book," she said, the same words the old man had spoken. But from her, they sounded mournful. Pleading. "That's how it begins." David shook his head violently. "No. I didn't sign anything real. It was a motel check-in. That's all." The woman took another step forward. The wet footprints pulled like ink, spreading in tendrils toward his shoes. "You don't understand. No one leaves once their name is written. You gave them permission." A door behind her creaked open, room 11, its number barely hanging from a rusted nail. From the darkness inside, a child's laughter echoed, high-pitched and broken. The sound rattled David's bones. The woman's shoulders hunched. Her voice dropped to a whisper sharp enough to cut. "Don't go in there. Don't ever go in." Before David could respond, the old man's voice boomed from nowhere and everywhere at once, vibrating through the motel walls. "Bring him back inside." The woman's hair lifted as though stirred by invisible wind. She jerked forward, her wet hands reaching for David's face. He ran. He didn't look back this time. He didn't care which direction the warped motel stretched. He only knew he had to get out. The rows of doors blurred together as his lungs burned. Somewhere behind him, multiple doors slammed open in unison, and footsteps, many footsteps, spilled into the corridor after him. The footsteps multiplied until they filled every space around him. Some were heavy, dragging like the ones he'd heard above his ceiling. Others were lighter, rapid, almost childlike. Their rhythm tangled together, a chaotic orchestra of pursuit. David sprinted toward what looked like the end of the row, a break in the motel's long stretch where the gravel lot opened back to the road. But as he neared it, the horizon bent, twisted, and the row of rooms stretched again, as if the motel itself refused to let him leave. He stumbled, fell to his knees, gravel biting into his skin. Behind him, the laughter of a child rang out again, closer this time. It wasn't playful. It was mocking, a sound that rose and fell like the taunt of something that had already won. "Stop running!" The voice was right above him. Not the old man's, not the woman's, something else. It came from everywhere, a deep, layered sound that crawled inside his chest. David forced himself up, clutching his side, and darted toward a random door. Room 23. He didn't think. He just yanked it open and slammed it shut behind him. The silence inside was immediate. Too immediate. The room was not like the others. The wallpaper peeled in long, curling strips, exposing blackened wood beneath. The bed was missing entirely, replaced by a single wooden chair positioned in the center of the floor. On the chair sat the guest book. Its leather cover was warped with water damage, but the pages inside were pristine, glowing faintly in the dim light. David's name was scrawled at the top of the first page, but now there were others beneath it. Dozens of names. Hundreds. Some were neat, others frantic, scratched so deeply the paper tore. His eyes scanned the list, his stomach sinking as he saw the name of the woman from the hallway, written in looping, delicate cursive, Anna Ward. The door behind him rattled violently, as if a mob of hands pounded against it. The chair creaked, though no one had touched it. The book's pages flipped on their own, stopping at a blank sheet. The pen he had used to sign the night before rolled out from between the pages and clinked onto the floor. Then, faintly, words began to carve themselves across the page, letter by jagged letter, as though an invisible hand was writing. "Stay, David. Stay." The pounding on the door grew louder. The knob twisted. A chorus of voices rose from outside, pleading, screaming, laughing. David staggered back from the chair, but the book pulsed with a strange light that rooted his eyes to the page. The doorframe cracked. A sliver of darkness oozed through like smoke. The door shuddered violently as the cracks widened, splinters of wood snapping and scattering across the warped carpet. The darkness seeping through the gaps thickened, writhing like something alive. It wasn't just shadow. It had weight, it had movement, and it carried with it a stench of rot and stagnant water. David pressed himself against the far wall, his eyes fixed on the book still glowing faintly on the chair. The page hadn't stopped writing. The words scratched themselves deeper, as if carved with a knife. "You belong here. You always have." His chest heaved. He wanted to scream that it wasn't true, that this place had nothing to do with him, but the moment the thought formed, memories flickered at the edges of his mind, images he didn't recognize. A man driving this same stretch of highway decades ago. A woman, barefoot, weeping in room 6. A child laughing in the dark. None of them were his memories. And yet, he felt them as if they were. The door finally gave way with a sickening crack. It swung inward, and the hallway beyond was gone. In its place stretched a cavernous black void, and from it spilled figures, dozens, maybe hundreds. Pale, waterlogged shapes that staggered forward on unsteady legs. Their faces were blurred, as if half dissolved, but their mouths gaped wide in perfect unison. The sound that came from them wasn't human. It was a low, vibrating moan, like a choir sung through broken throats. David lunged for the chair. He didn't know why, only that the book seemed like the center of this nightmare. He grabbed it, the leather slick and cold in his hands. The moment he lifted it, the figures froze mid-step, heads snapping toward him. The moaning stopped. In the silence, Anna's voice whispered near his ear, though no one stood beside him. "Don't let them take it. If they take it, you're lost." His pulse thundered in his ears. He staggered toward the window, the only possible exit left. The glass was fogged with condensation, but he could see a faint strip of daylight on the other side. He hurled the book through first. It didn't shatter the glass. It passed through like the window was made of water, rippling and glowing before vanishing. The figures shrieked, a collective wail so piercing it rattled the walls. David didn't hesitate. He dove headfirst after the book. The window swallowed him whole. For a moment, David felt nothing. No air in his lungs, no ground beneath him, only the sensation of being dragged through cold water. His ears rang with a muffled roar, and his eyes burned, though he couldn't tell if it was from light or darkness. Then, abruptly, he was on his hands and knees, coughing. Gravel pressed into his palms, sharp and real. He blinked furiously until his vision steadied. The motel was gone. In its place stretched an empty lot, overgrown with weeds and littered with crumbling concrete slabs where buildings once stood. Rusted rebar jutted from the earth like broken bones. The neon sign, the office, the rows of doors, all had vanished, leaving only the skeleton of what might have been decades ago. The air smelled different too. Fresher. Alive. Birds cawed in the distance. For the first time in hours, maybe days, David could breathe without the taste of mildew clogging his throat. But the book was still in his hands. Its leather cover was dry now, cracked with age. When he opened it, the pages were yellowed, brittle, and covered in hundreds of signatures, his included. Yet his name, scrawled in fresh ink, was the only one not faded by time. "Impossible," he whispered. A breeze shifted through the lot, stirring weeds around his knees. From somewhere behind him, a woman's voice carried, faint but clear enough to freeze his blood. "David!" He turned sharply. Anna stood near the remains of what might have been the office, her dress no longer dripping but torn and faded with dust. Her eyes were visible now, sunken dark, but no longer hidden. She looked more human, more solid, though her skin still bore that pallor of someone long lost. "You brought it with you," she said, nodding at the book. David clutched it tighter. "What is this? Why me?" Anna's expression flickered with something like pity. "Because you opened the door. Because you signed. Once your name is written, you carry it. And it carries you." Her form shimmered faintly in the sunlight, edges fraying. David's throat tightened. You're not free, are you?" She shook her head slowly. "Not yet. But you might be." The ground beneath them groaned. A deep rumble vibrated through the lot, and from the cracks in the concrete, black water began to seep upward, bubbling as if something beneath strained to rise again. Anna's eyes darted toward it, then back to him. "Choose quickly, David. Burn the book, or keep it. Either way, it won't let you go quietly." The bubbling black water spread across the lot in uneven rivulets, creeping toward David's shoes. It hissed where it touched the sunlit gravel, releasing a bitter stench like oil and rot. The ground quivered with each pulse, as though something massive stirred beneath. David clutched the book to his chest. "Burn it? With what? I don't even..." Before he could finish, Anna raised her hand. In her palm flickered a faint orange glow, like the ember of a dying match. Her body shimmered with it, unstable, as if the effort of conjuring even that small flame was tearing her apart. "Take it," she urged, her voice strained. "End it now." He hesitated, sweat beating at his temple. The book felt heavier by the second, its pages vibrating faintly, as though it had its own heartbeat. A voice, faint at first, then clearer, whispered from inside the leather binding. Don't listen. This is your key. With us, you'll never be alone again." David nearly dropped it. His pulse raced, caught between Anna's desperate plea and the insidious comfort of that whisper. The ground split open with a thunderous crack. From the fissure rose a figure, no longer vague or blurred like the others he had seen. This one was solid, massive, and drenched in shadows that writhed like serpents around its body. Its face was a void, but within it burned two red sparks, hateful and ancient. Anna's voice broke into panic. "David, burn it!" But the book pulsed in his hands, a warmth that almost felt protective. Images flashed in his mind: escape, safety, a life returned to normal. The book promised him everything if he just held on. The shadowed figure stepped forward, and the earth trembled with each stride. Its voice was the same one he had heard in the motel, layered, crawling, impossibly deep. "You are mine. You signed." David stood paralyzed, torn between two impossible choices, the fragile ember in Anna's hand, and the weight of the book in his own. The fissure spread, black water gushing now, flooding the lot. The figure's shape swelled higher, its shoulders scraping against the sky itself. Anna screamed. "Choose, David! Now!" David's hand shook violently as he reached toward Anna's flickering ember. The book fought him, its leather binding tightening like it had grown claws into his palms. The whispers inside grew frantic now, pleading and threatening in the same breath. "Keep us. We'll give you everything. A safe road, a home, people who know your name. Drop her, she's nothing. Choose us." Anna stepped closer, her body phasing in and out of solidity, the ember glowing brighter with her urgency. her face twisted in desperation. "Don't listen! That's how they trap you. That's how they've trapped everyone before you. Burn it!" The massive figure looming from the fissure let out a roar that shook the air, a sound so deep it rattled David's teeth. Black water surged higher, reaching his ankles, burning like acid where it touched skin. He cried out, stumbling forward. With a final burst of will, he tore the book away from his chest and thrust it toward Anna's outstretched hand. The ember flared as soon as it touched the leather, a sudden violent burst of flame that roared to life with impossible hunger. The book shrieked. There was no other word for it. Pages writhed as though alive, ink running off the paper in streams of black smoke. The shadows recoiled. The towering figure reeled backward, its red sparks of eyes blazing with fury. "No! He is ours!" The fire spread, racing across the lot. The book writhed like a living thing as the flames consumed it, pages curling into ash. The black water boiled and steamed, the fissures trembling violently as if the earth itself tried to seal shut. Anna screamed too, not in pain, but in release. Her form burned with the same fire, flaring brilliantly. For the first time, David saw her clearly, young, alive, tears running down her face. Her voice broke through the roar of destruction. "Thank you?" The world collapsed. The motel, the figure, the endless rows of rooms, everything folded inward, sucked into the fissures that snapped shut with a deafening crack. The fire extinguished in an instant, leaving only silence and the smell of smoke. David staggered, falling to his knees. The lot was empty again, just weeds and broken concrete under a clear sky. No book in his hands. No Anna. Only the faint outline of footprints in the dust, leading away toward the road. He sat there, trembling, unable to tell if he had freed himself, or if something far worse was waiting on the highway ahead. The silence pressed in heavy, almost unreal after the chaos. David's ears still rang with the echo of the fissures snapping shut, but the world around him was eerily still. The overgrown lot stretched out under a washed-out morning sun, as if nothing had ever stood there at all. Slowly, shakily, he rose to his feet. His jeans were soaked to the knee from the black water, but now it was gone, leaving only faint scorch marks etched into the gravel, shapes that twisted and curved like letters from a language he couldn't read. The footprints caught his eye again, fresh ones, pressed into the dust. Bare feet, smaller than his, leading toward the cracked asphalt road. He followed, each step feeling heavier than the last. His throat was dry, his thoughts clouded, but something inside compelled him onward. The prints wove through the weeds and stopped at the edge of the highway. There, abandoned on the shoulder, sat a single brass key. David's stomach dropped. He recognized it immediately, the same heavy brass key he had been handed in the motel office. The same chipped plastic tag, room 6, still dangling from its ring. He bent down, hesitant, and picked it up. The tag was damp, as though pulled from deep water. A car horn blared. David spun, shielding his eyes. For the first time since the storm began, another vehicle approached, a beat-up pickup truck rattling along the highway. The driver slowed, leaning out the window. "Hey, you alright?" the man called. "Ain't safe walking this stretch. Folks say it's cursed." David stared, unable to form words. His hand clenched tighter around the key. The driver frowned, jerking his thumb toward the passenger seat. "Hop in. I'll take you into town." David hesitated. For a moment, the image of Anna's face flickered in his mind, her final, "thank you," still ringing in his ears. The lot behind him lay empty, nothing but sunlit weeds and silence. But when he glanced down, the brass tag had changed. No longer did it read room 6. Now, faintly etched into the plastic, was a single word. Return. The pickup's engine idled, the driver waiting. And David realized he hadn't escaped. Not fully. Not yet. The word on the tag seemed to sear itself into David's vision, return. No matter how tightly he gripped the brass key, his palm damp with sweat, he couldn't block it out. The driver leaned a little farther out of his truck window, suspicion tightening his brow. "You deaf, son?" I said, "Get in." You look like you've seen a ghost. David swallowed hard. His voice cracked when he answered. I'm fine. Just, where's the next town? The man squinted. Couple miles down. Cedar Ridge. Ain't much, but you'll find a diner, a phone. Maybe a change of clothes. His gaze lingered on David's soaked jeans, the scratches across his arms. You sure you don't need a hospital? David almost laughed, an ugly, hollow sound. A hospital? What would he tell them? That he'd been trapped in a motel that didn't exist, signing a guest book that ate people's names? No, he said quickly. Just a ride. The driver shrugged, jerking his chin at the passenger door. Well, don't stand there like a scarecrow. Get in before the sun cooks you. David slid into the truck. The vinyl seat was hot, sticky against his damp clothes. He kept the key clenched in his fist, hidden from the driver's view. The engine rumbled, and they rolled forward, the weeds and broken concrete of the lot receding in the side mirror. For a moment, David almost allowed himself to believe it was over. The wind rushing through the open window carried the scent of dry fields, hay, and dust, ordinary, human smells. He pressed his forehead against the glass, eyes stinging with exhaustion. You local? The driver asked casually. No. Just passing through. The man grunted. Folks say nobody just passes through around here. Road'll swallow you up if you're not careful. Ain't the first time I've seen someone standing out by those ruins. David's stomach tightened. Ruins? The driver nodded at the receding lot. Used to be a motel back in the 70s. Burned down after some nasty business. Don't know the details. People don't talk about it. But every so often, someone ends up out there. Lost. Looking like you did. David didn't answer. His grip tightened on the key until the edges dug into his skin. He glanced down at the tag. The word had changed again. The plastic now read, faintly etched. Soon. The truck rattled into Cedar Ridge, a town so small it looked like it could vanish in a single blink. A single main street cut through, lined with faded brick buildings, most with peeling signs. A diner with a neon coffee cup flickering above the door. A hardware store with dusty windows. A gas station with only 2 pumps, one wrapped in caution tape. The driver pulled up in front of the diner and shifted into park. Here you go. Best coffee for 30 miles, though that ain't saying much. You need a phone, they got one inside. David nodded mutely, still holding the key in his fist. The man studied him a moment longer. Listen, don't go back to that lot, you hear me? Folks who do don't come back the same. If they come back at all. Before David could answer, the driver put the truck in gear and rumbled off down the road, leaving a trail of dust in the summer air. David turned toward the diner. Its windows were fogged with grease, the door propped open with a brick. A bell jingled as he stepped inside. The place smelled of fried food and stale coffee. A few locals sat in booths, hunched over plates of eggs. The waitress, a woman in her 50s with tired eyes and a pencil stuck in her hair, looked up. Sit anywhere you like, hon. David slid into a corner booth, the vinyl seat cracked beneath him. He ordered coffee without thinking, just needing something to ground him. The warmth of the mug between his hands felt almost foreign, like he hadn't touched anything real in days. When he finally opened his palm, the key sat there, gleaming faintly under the fluorescent lights. The tag had changed again. Now it read, "Check in tonight." His stomach dropped. He shoved it into his pocket quickly, looking around. Nobody seemed to notice, but a man at the counter, a heavy-set local in a baseball cap, kept glancing at him through the mirror behind the bar. The waitress refilled his cup. "Passing through?" she asked. David hesitated. "Trying to." Her eyes flicked toward the pocket where he'd hidden the key, as though she already knew. Then she leaned down, her voice low, tight. "Whatever you do, don't answer if they knock on your door tonight." David froze, his throat dry. "What do you mean?" The bell over the diner door jingled. A gust of cold air swept through, though the day outside was blazing. And when David looked up, The old man from the motel stood in the doorway, cardigan dripping wet, eyes black as tar. The chatter in the diner died instantly, as though someone had cut the sound out of the world. Forks hovered midair. Coffee cups stilled. Even the jukebox in the corner seemed to choke off its tune. The old man stood in the doorway, water dripping steadily from his cardigan onto the scuffed linoleum. His face was the same as before, skin parchment thin, mouth too wide, but now his presence carried a weight that pressed against David's ribs, making it hard to breathe. No one else reacted. The locals stared past the man as if he wasn't there, their gazes vacant, glassy. Only the waitress looked alive, her knuckles white around the coffee pot she clutched. "Don't," she whispered, eyes fixed on David. "Don't speak to him." But the old man's gaze locked onto David like a spotlight, ignoring everyone else in the room. He raised a hand, water streaming from his fingertips, and beckoned. "Room 6 is waiting," he rasped. David's stomach lurched. He shoved himself out of the booth so fast the table rattled. The waitress stepped back, but her lips trembled with something like pity. "You can't run forever." Ignoring her, David bolted for the back door. It slammed open into a narrow alley, heat radiating from the pavement. He sprinted, lungs burning, his shoes slapping puddles left from a storm that hadn't touched this town. Behind him, the wet footsteps followed. Slow. Unhurried. Certain. He darted across the street, nearly colliding with a car that honked angrily. He didn't stop. He tore through a side street, past shuttered storefronts and empty houses with curtains drawn tight. The whole town felt wrong now, too still, too staged, as though Cedar Ridge were nothing but a backdrop built around him. He stumbled into the gas station lot, panting. The glass door rattled as he yanked it open, bell jangling overhead. The clerk, a bored-looking teenager, glanced up from behind the counter. "You okay, man? You look..." David slammed the brass key onto the counter. "Do you see this? Do you see the word on the tag?" The kid frowned, leaning closer. "It's blank." David's heart plummeted. He snatched it back. The plastic tag still bore words, but now only he could see them. "Check in now." The lights in the gas station flickered. A low hum vibrated through the walls, like the groan of a building under strain. And then, through the aisles of snack food and dusty shelves, David saw it, a door that shouldn't exist, wedged between the soda cooler and the restroom. Its brass number gleamed faintly in the fluorescent light. 6. David's mouth went dry. The door shouldn't have been there, couldn't have been there. The gas station was a boxy little building with one restroom, no back rooms. And yet the brass number glimmered on the wood like it had always belonged. 6. His hand tightened around the key in his pocket, the edges biting into his palm. He didn't want to look, but his eyes were dragged back to the plastic tag anyway. The word had shifted again. "Enter." The hum in the walls deepened, rattling the glass front of the store. The clerk frowned, rubbing at his ears. "You hear that? Feels like... I don't know, like pressure." He glanced toward the door with a puzzled expression. "What's that?" "We don't." The lights cut out. Darkness swallowed the gas station, broken only by the faint green glow of an exit sign. The air grew heavy, damp, smelling of mildew. David backed toward the counter. "You see it now, don't you?" The clerk didn't answer. His eyes were vacant, fixed on the door. Slowly, without expression, he began to walk toward it, like a sleepwalker. "Stop!" David shouted, grabbing his arm. But the boy's skin was cold, slick, and his body jerked free with unnatural strength. He reached the door, lifted a trembling hand, and knocked. 3 hollow thuds echoed through the room. The tag in David's pocket burned hot, the plastic melting slightly against his leg. He yanked it out. This time the words blazed so bright they hurt his eyes. "Open it!" The knob turned on its own. The door creaked inward, and beyond it lay not the back of a gas station, but a dark corridor lined with peeling turquoise paint. A familiar windmill painting hung crooked on the far wall. Room 6. The clerk stepped through without hesitation and vanished into the black. The door remained open, the stale, damp air spilling out. Behind David, the glass storefront rattled violently. Through the warped reflection in the glass, he saw the old man's figure standing outside, waiting, cardigan dripping. The choice slammed down on him like a weight: step through the door, or face what waited outside. David's chest heaved as he stood frozen between the door and the glass storefront. Outside, the old man's silhouette blurred in the reflection, his outline dripping, his mouth stretched into that grotesque, too wide grin. The figure didn't move. It only waited. Inside, the open doorway breathed damp air, carrying the faintest echo of footsteps pacing overhead. The same sound from his first night. The key in David's hand pulsed with heat, demanding. The words on the tag had shifted yet again. Choose. The clerk's voice drifted back from the dark corridor beyond the door. Flat, toneless, wrong. It's easier if you stop fighting. David's throat tightened. He couldn't follow. He wouldn't follow. But as he turned toward the storefront, the glass trembled violently, as though the old man's presence pressed harder against it. Cracks spidered across the pane, thin rivulets of water leaking through like veins. He was trapped. With a strangled sound, David bolted toward the counter, searching frantically. His hands closed around a red canister, a half-empty gas container for lawn mowers. He stumbled back, unscrewing the cap with shaking fingers, and the sharp stink of gasoline filled the air. He splashed it across the doorframe, the floor, his own shoes. The wet slap of fuel on linoleum rang louder than his heartbeat. Then he dug into his pocket, fumbling for the lighter he'd carried since the motel, the one he had forgotten until now. His thumb scraped the wheel. The old man's voice hissed through the glass, deeper than before, layered with countless others. Burning changes nothing. You signed. You belong. David struck the lighter. A tiny flame danced in the dark, fragile but real. His hand shook, sweat dripping into his eyes. The gasoline fumes burned his throat. Maybe, he whispered hoarsely. But I'm not going back. He dropped the flame. Fire erupted, racing across the floor in a hungry flash. The corridor beyond the impossible door shrieked as if it were alive, the sound of hundreds of voices screaming in unison. The walls buckled, paint blistering and peeling in an instant. The clerk's silhouette twisted violently in the flames, dissolving into smoke. The glass storefront shattered outward. A rush of black water spilled into the parking lot, carrying with it the old man's bellow of rage, cut short as the fire roared higher, consuming everything. David threw himself flat, arms over his head, as the world around him cracked, hissed, and burned. Then silence. When he opened his eyes, he was lying on warm asphalt under the noonday sun. The gas station was gone. The lot was empty. And in his hand, unburned, untouched, the brass key still glinted. This time, the tag read only one word. Soon. The silence of the empty lot was deafening. No voices. No fire. No shrieking walls. Just the steady drone of cicadas in the distance, the summer heat pressing down like a hand on his back. David sat up slowly, his ears ringing, his palms scraped raw from the asphalt. The gas station was gone without a trace, not even rubble, not even scorched marks. Just a wide patch of cracked pavement littered with weeds, as though the building had never stood there. The brass key felt heavier than ever in his hand. The tag glowed faintly, pulsing with its single word. Soon. He hurled it across the lot with all the strength he had left. It clattered once, twice, before skidding into the weeds. David's chest heaved as he staggered to his feet. He didn't care where it went. He needed to get out of Cedar Ridge. He needed to put as much distance between himself and this cursed highway as possible. The main street wasn't far. He followed it in a daze, passing storefronts with dusty windows, all eerily quiet. No cars moved along the road. No voices called out. Even the diner, where just minutes ago people had been eating, drinking, alive, was dark now, its windows empty. The neon coffee cup above the door flickered once before snuffing out completely. A terrible thought crept in. Had the fire taken them too? Or had they never been real? David kept walking, forcing his legs forward despite the shaking in his knees. He made it to the edge of town where the highway stretched empty in both directions. The sky was too bright, too clear, the horizon wavering in the heat. He almost didn't see it at first. Something gleamed in the road ahead. Small. Metallic. David's heart dropped. The key. It lay dead center on the cracked asphalt, its brass catching the sunlight, the tag turned upward. He forced himself closer, dread crawling up his spine. The word had changed again. Tonight. David's stomach lurched. He stumbled back, sweat chilling against his skin. No matter where he threw it, no matter how he tried to destroy it, the key always came back. A faint sound drifted across the hot air. Footsteps. Not behind him, not beside him, above. Slow, deliberate pacing across an invisible ceiling overhead. And then, from somewhere far down the highway, a neon flicker blinked faintly against the horizon. A sign. The Crosswind Motel. It was waiting for him. David froze in the middle of the highway, sweat dripping down his back despite the dry heat. The neon sign flickered in the distance, weak against the sunlight but unmistakable. The Crosswind Motel. It hadn't been there a moment ago. He knew it. The horizon had been empty, only road and scrubland. But now the sign buzzed faintly, just visible through the shimmer of heat. David's stomach churned. His mind screamed to turn around, to run in the opposite direction, but every nerve in his body buzzed with the same dreadful certainty. There was no other direction. The road might look empty, but it would only bend back here. The key burned in his palm again. He hadn't even realized he'd picked it up, but there it was, brass biting into his skin. The tag bore its newest command. Drive. A sudden honk shattered the stillness. David spun to see a car, a dusty sedan, slowing beside him. A young woman leaned across the passenger seat, sunglasses perched on her head. You stranded? She asked. Where you headed? David's throat locked up. The motel sign flickered again in the distance, drawing his gaze. The woman followed his eyes, squinting. You mean that old motel? Don't bother. Been closed since I was a kid. Folks around here say it's haunted. She laughed lightly, but there was no warmth in it. Still, I can give you a lift to the next town. David opened his mouth, then closed it. The key seared against his palm like a brand. The words shifted again, the letters rearranging themselves as he watched. Go with her. The woman smiled faintly, her hand tapping the wheel. Well? You coming? David's pulse hammered in his ears. He could refuse, stay on the highway, face the motel sign pulling him in like gravity. Or he could take her offer, knowing deep down that nothing this close to Cedar Ridge could be as simple as it seemed. The footsteps overhead returned, soft, dragging, inescapable. David tightened his grip on the key. The sedan idled beside him, engine rattling faintly, the heat shimmer blurring its edges as though it, too, wasn't entirely solid. The woman drummed her fingers on the steering wheel, her smile polite but brittle, stretched too long. You're not gonna last out here, she said. Roads empty for miles. No water, no shade. You'll roast. David swallowed hard, the metallic taste of fear sharp on his tongue. The motel sign flickered again down the highway, closer this time, though neither the car nor he had moved. The letters buzzed faintly in the noon light, as if impatient. He looked at the key. The word on the tag had shifted once more. Trust her. The heat pressing against him thickened, sticky, almost suffocating. The sound of the footsteps overhead matched the rhythm of his pulse now. Thud, 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 relentless. Who are you? He asked, his voice hoarse. The woman tilted her head. Someone offering you a ride. That's all. She gestured to the empty passenger seat. Unless you want to keep walking toward that thing. David's gaze flicked back to the motel sign. For a second, he thought he saw figures standing beneath it, rows of people, still as statues, their faces turned toward him. His vision blurred. When he blinked, they were gone. Only the buzzing neon remained. The woman's smile faltered as his hesitation stretched. It'll follow you, you know. Doesn't matter where you go. But you might as well come with me. At least you won't face it alone. The words struck something deep inside him. Alone. That had been the worst part of this nightmare. The sense that the motel, the voices, the shadows had singled him out, hollowing the world around him. He placed one hand on the door handle, the metal scalding in the heat. The woman's eyes flicked down, just for an instant, to the brass key in his other hand. Her pupils dilated. So you've already checked in? Her voice had changed, softer, almost reverent. David froze. What did you just say? The woman smiled again, this time too wide, the exact same way the old man had. David's hand dropped from the door handle as if burned. The woman's smile lingered, wide and stiff, but her eyes had gone dark, too dark, swallowing the sunlight instead of reflecting it. You've already signed, she said softly, her tone shifting into the raspy knew too well. You can't hitch your way out of this. Her voice layered, not hers at all anymore, deeper, echoing, the same as the old man's. The sedan's engine groaned, coughing like a sick animal. The radio clicked on by itself, static roaring through the speakers. Between the bursts of white noise, David swore he heard voices whispering his name. He stumbled back from the car. No, you're not real. The woman tilted her head, her neck bending too far, joints popping like breaking twigs. Real enough to drive you where you belong. The key in his hand vibrated violently, almost leaping from his palm. The tag shifted again, letters crawling across the plastic like insects. Get in. David's legs trembled, but he didn't move closer. Instead, he hurled the key into the weeds, his voice breaking. I'm not playing this game anymore. For the first time, the smile faltered. The woman's face twitched, her eyes narrowing in something like anger. It doesn't matter where you throw it. It will always come back. Always. She leaned closer, her skin rippling as if something beneath it strained to break free. The only way out is through. The sedan's tires squealed suddenly, spinning without moving forward, kicking up dust and smoke though the car remained in place. The woman's body flickered like a broken film reel, one frame her, the next the old man in the cardigan, then back again. David turned and ran. The footsteps above matched him, faster now, pounding in rhythm with his desperate strides. He didn't care where the road led, he just needed to be away from that car, from her. But after only a few minutes, his lungs burning, he skidded to a stop. Because there, at the side of the road, waiting patiently in the dust, lay the brass key. The tag was blank at first, until he picked it up again. Then the letters carved themselves in fresh, wet ink. Room 6 is ready. And in the distance, closer than ever, the neon sign buzzed. The Crosswind Motel. The neon glow bled into the horizon, no longer faint but sharp, cutting against the sky like a wound. David staggered forward, sweat plastering his shirt to his skin, each step heavier than the last. It was as if the road itself tilted, gravity pulling him toward the motel. The closer he drew, the clearer it became. The sign hummed in rhythm with his pulse. The words the Crosswind Motel flickered, letters sputtering in and out, sometimes spelling nonsense, sometimes his name. David clutched the key, his knuckles white. The tag now bore a message so simple it chilled him more than any of the others had. Welcome back. The motel stood waiting exactly as he had first seen it, peeling turquoise paint, a sagging row of doors, the office glowing weakly. But this time there were cars in the lot. Dozens. Rusted, abandoned, some with flat tires, others with doors hanging open. Dust covered them, thick as if they'd been sitting for decades. He slowed, dread filling his chest. Every car had something inside, shapes in the driver's seats, slumped, motionless. Passengers whose faces were blurred, features melted into nothing. He tried not to look, but his eyes caught on one vehicle, a green station wagon. In the back seat sat a child's car seat. A small figure still strapped in, head tilted. The glass had fogged from the inside. David tore his gaze away, his throat tightening. The office door creaked open as if on cue. The old man stepped out, cardigan dripping though the sky was clear. His black eyes locked onto David's, and his lips peeled back in that grotesque smile. "You came back on your own," he rasped, his voice layered, vibrating through the air. "They always do." David's legs shook. "What do you want from me?" The old man tilted his head. "You signed. You stay. That's the order of things." He gestured toward the row of rooms, each door slightly ajar, shadows thick inside. "One of them is yours. It always was." The key in David's hand pulsed hot. The brass tag glowed, numbers burning across the surface. 6. Behind the doors, faint voices began to murmur, rising in unison, whispering his name. The old man extended a hand, skeletal and wet. "It's time to check in." David's legs rooted to the cracked asphalt, every instinct in him screaming to run, yet the pull of the motel was irresistible. The murmurs behind the doors grew louder, overlapping into a chorus of whispers. His name, again and again, spoken in voices he half recognized. His mother. His first girlfriend. A childhood friend long dead in a car accident. All repeating in the same cadence. "David. Room 6 is waiting." His throat tightened. He clutched the key so hard the brass edges sliced into his skin, warm blood smearing across the tag. The number still glowed faintly. The old man's hand remained outstretched, dripping water onto the ground in steady droplets. His smile never faltered. "You can delay. You can fight. But in the end, this place is where all roads lead." David forced himself to move, one step backward, then another. "No. I burned it. I ended it. You shouldn't even exist anymore." The old man's black eyes narrowed, and his voice deepened, layered with dozens of others. "You ended nothing. Fire only cleans the surface. We are writening you now. That cannot be undone." The murmur of voices swelled, building into moans, then laughter, then weeping. The doors along the row swung wider in unison, revealing glimpses of the rooms beyond. Not ordinary motel rooms now, but distorted spaces, a long, flooded hallway, a stairwell descending into black water, a hospital ward lined with rusted beds. Each one throbbed with the sense of lives stolen, trapped. David stumbled backward until he nearly fell against a rusting car. His eyes darted wildly across the lot, searching for escape. And then movement. At the far end of the motel stood Anna. No longer dripping, no longer fractured. Her form was clearer than before, but her eyes were shadowed, her expression unreadable. She lifted her hand slightly, beckoning him toward her end of the row. "Don't listen." Her voice carried faintly, barely audible over the cacophony. "Not yet. There's still another way." The key pulsed so violently in David's hand it felt like a second heartbeat. The tag burned with words once more. "Choose your room." And every door in the motel swung wide, waiting. The motel groaned like a living thing, its walls warping as the doors gaped wider. Inside each one, shadows shifted and writhed, beckoning. The voices swelled into a dissonant chorus, pleading, mocking, cajoling. "Come in. Rest. Stay. You signed. You're ours." David's grip on the key was slick with blood. His eyes darted from door to door, each one a nightmare in waiting. Room 4 oozed water across the lot, dark and oily. Room 11's doorway flickered with the sound of a child's laughter, shrill and broken. Room 18 yawned into a staircase plunging into endless dark. And Room 6, his room, glowed faintly from within, a sickly light spilling across the asphalt. Anna stood at the far end, her arms still raised, her lips shaping the words. "Not that way." David staggered, heart hammering. "Why me?" he shouted, voice raw. "What did I do?" The old man's grin split wider, the corners of his mouth cracking open. "You signed. That is all it takes. A mark, a promise. Consent is the only door we need." The shadows behind him laughed. The voices of his past twisted into cruel mimicry. His father's scorn, his ex's rage, his own voice whispering doubts he had buried years ago. They layered over one another until he wanted to tear his ears off just to silence them. Anna's voice cut through, sharper, more human. Don't listen! The book is gone. They can't bind you without it. They're weaker now. That's why they need you to walk in willingly. David looked at her, desperation flooding him. Then what do I do? Her gaze flicked to the cars. Every soul they've kept is tied to this place. Break the tie, break their hold. He turned. Dozens of cars sat rusting in the lot, each with blurred, faceless figures inside. Some slumped over steering wheels. Others sat upright, staring blankly forward. Shapes of people who had come before him, and never left. The old man hissed, the sound like steam escaping a broken pipe. Don't listen to her. She is bound as well. She only longs for company in her prison. The motel shook violently, doors slamming against their frames. The key blazed in David's palm, words scorching into the tag. Choose now. Anna's voice cracked as she shouted. The cars, David! Free them before it claims you too! The air vibrated with tension, the motel pulsing like a heart too big for its chest. The cars in the lot gleamed dully in the neon light, windshields fogged from the inside. Shapes slumped in every seat, men, women, even children, all blurred, as though memory itself had melted their features. David's stomach twisted. If Anna was right, these weren't just corpses. They were prisoners. He staggered toward the nearest vehicle, a rust-eaten sedan with one flat tire. Inside, a figure leaned against the window, its blurred face turned toward him. As he touched the door handle, the key in his hand burned hotter, words forming again on the plastic tag. Don't. He yanked the handle anyway. The door groaned, stuck, then burst open with a screech. A wave of freezing air poured out, reeking of mildew and stagnant water. The figure inside convulsed once and then collapsed forward, dissolving into mist. The windshield cleared instantly, leaving only an empty, dusty seat. The ground shook. The motel screamed, a high-pitched, metallic shriek that rattled his bones. The old man's voice thundered over it, filled with fury. Stop! They are ours! David stumbled back, chest heaving, but Anna's voice cut through the chaos. Again! Do it again! He rushed to another car, this one a station wagon with cracked vinyl seats. The blurred figure inside sat rigid, hands locked on the wheel. David wrenched the door open. The same icy rush spilled out, and the figure shattered like glass, scattering into smoke. The car sagged as though decades of weight had just been lifted. The motel roared louder, its sign flickering wildly, some letters sparking and dying. The asphalt beneath David's feet split, thin rivulets of black water bubbling up between the cracks. The old man staggered forward now, his once skeletal frame bulging, skin stretching as if too many voices pressed against it from inside. His grin had become a jagged maw. You cannot undo what is written. But David didn't stop. He sprinted from car to car, ripping doors open, tearing blurred figures from their prisons. Each release sent another shriek from the motel, its walls warping, paint peeling in sheets. The lot filled with smoke that spun upward, shapes of freed figures flickering like candle flames before vanishing into the night sky. By the time he reached the final car, the green station wagon with the child's seat, his hands were raw, his breath ragged. He hesitated, staring at the small blurred figure strapped in. His chest ached. Behind him, the motel groaned, its doors slamming shut one by one. The old man shrieked. Don't touch that one. The key seared his palm, fresh words branding into the tag. Leave it! Anna's voice broke, desperate, pleading. Don't listen. Free them all. David's hands trembled on the handle of the green station wagon. The child's car seat sat in the back, straps buckled tight around the blurred, motionless figure. It was smaller than the others, fragile. The fogged glass muffled the sound of faint whimpering, soft and rhythmic, like a child crying in its sleep. The key in his hand burned so hot he nearly dropped it. The tag's letters glowed bright, pulsing like a heartbeat. Leave it! Behind him, the old man's voice cracked into something monstrous, no longer a rasp but a roar that shook the sky. Some doors must stay closed. Do not touch what is ours. Anna's voice cut through, sharp and clear, though she stood far down the row. That's why it's fighting you, David. That one binds them all. The ground split wider, black water gushing up around his shoes. The motel's walls warped inward, doors slamming violently as if in protest. The neon sign flickered so fiercely that sparks hissed down into the lot. David gritted his teeth, heart hammering. His instincts screamed that opening this last car meant unleashing something worse, something the motel truly feared. But Anna's face, her desperation, anchored him. "Free them all," she begged again, her voice nearly breaking. David yanked the handle. The door stuck, groaning under his grip. He pulled harder, muscles straining, until at last it gave with a sound like tearing metal. The child's blurred figure twitched violently. The whimpering rose to a shriek, piercing and inhuman. The air temperature plunged, his breath fogging instantly in the sweltering heat. Then the figure dissolved. Not into smoke like the others, but into a blast of white light that erupted skyward, tearing through the motel's neon sign. The letters exploded in a spray of sparks. The ground heaved. The walls of the crosswind buckled, collapsing inward as if pulled by an invisible vortex. Doors snapped off their hinges, sucked into the swirling black water. The old man screamed, his voice layered with 1,000 others, until the sound fractured into static. His form unraveled, ripping apart into strips of shadow that dissolved in the wind. Anna cried out, falling to her knees as the freed light washed over her. For a heartbeat, her face was no longer pale or blurred but whole, alive, glowing with gratitude. And then silence. The motel was gone. The lot was empty. No cars, no sign, no water. Just cracked earth under a fading sun. David stood alone, gasping, the brass key still in his hand. The tag was blank now. No words. No numbers. Just smooth, featureless plastic. But deep in his chest, he felt it. The footsteps hadn't stopped. They were pacing still, just above him, waiting. The silence after the collapse felt wrong, brittle, like glass stretched too thin. David stood in the middle of the barren lot, chest heaving, the empty horizon swaying in the heat. Nothing remained of the crosswind. No doors, no neon, no dripping old man. Just dust. And yet, the footsteps persisted. Soft. Deliberate. Pacing directly above him on an invisible ceiling. The sound was so clear he almost expected to see dust falling from the sky. His head tilted back, though he feared what he might find. There was nothing. Just the sun glaring down, unwavering. The key dug into his palm. He opened his fist. The brass was cool now, inert. The plastic tag lay blank, as though all its commands had finally burned away. Relief flickered in him, fragile and fleeting. Then the footsteps stopped. The sudden absence hit harder than the sound itself. The silence was suffocating. David's ears rang, waiting for the next step, but none came. Instead, he heard something else. A knock. 3 sharp raps. He spun, scanning the empty lot. There were no doors, no cars, no walls for the sound to have come from. Still, the knocks came again, louder this time, vibrating in his chest. Bang. 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 It was coming from his left hand. David stared in horror as the blank plastic tag on the key began to ripple, the surface bulging outward as though something pressed against it from the inside. The knock echoed again, this time muffled, like fists pounding from behind a thin wall. Words began to etch themselves onto the tag, jagged and frantic. "Let us out." David dropped the key, but it clanged against the asphalt and rolled back toward him, stopping at his shoe like it had weight and will of its own. The knocking grew louder, faster, a dozen fists hammering at once. Anna's voice whispered faintly behind him, trembling and strained. "You freed them, but something stayed behind." David turned. She stood at the far edge of the lot, her form dim now, flickering, like she was being pulled away. "Not all of them made it out, David. The book wasn't just theirs. It's in you now." He staggered backward. "No. I burned it. It's gone." Anna shook her head slowly. Her eyes were filled with sorrow. "It's not gone. It's rewritten. In you. The tag on the key glowed again, brighter than before. New words seared into it, hot and final. Room 6, occupied. David's stomach dropped as the words burned into the tag, their glow searing against the fading light. Room 6, occupied. His hand shook as he reached for the key again, though every fiber of him screamed not to touch it. The brass was ice cold now, colder than the night air settling over the lot. When his fingers closed around it, a pulse rippled up his arm, a rhythm not his own, steady and suffocating. Thud, thud, thud. The same cadence as the footsteps. David staggered, clutching his chest. The rhythm wasn't just in his hand anymore, it was inside him. His heart fought against it, irregular and frantic, but the foreign beat pressed harder, steady, unrelenting. Anna's figure flickered closer, her edges unraveling like smoke in the wind. Do you feel it? That's the mark. They rewrote it into you when you signed. David's voice broke. Then why free the others? Why fight it at all? Her eyes shimmered with grief. Because they deserved release. And you, she hesitated, her form shivering like static. You might still have a choice. The footsteps resumed. Louder now, circling. Not above him this time, but within him. David gasped, feeling the weight of someone pacing inside his chest, each step rattling his ribs. The key pulsed, words shifting again. Check-in confirmed. No! David hurled it across the lot, but it didn't fall. Instead, it hung suspended in midair, glowing, spinning slowly. The tag split open like a wound, black water dripping from it, and sizzling as it hit the ground. The puddles spread outward in veins, cracking the asphalt. The motel sign flickered into existence again on the horizon, closer than ever, humming like it fed directly from his veins. Anna staggered, her form collapsing inward. She screamed, not in pain, but in warning. David, don't let them anchor here. If the room takes hold inside you, the crosswind will live again through you. The water spread faster, splitting into crooked lines that etched themselves into the ground. Shapes of doors appeared in the cracks, hinges groaning. One after another, motel rooms rose from the earth, rebuilt from nothing, turquoise paint peeling, numbers shining faintly in the dark. And at the center of it all, a door swung open on its own. Room 6. The lot trembled as the doors clawed their way out of the earth, each one slamming into place with a boom that shook David's chest. Paint peeled as soon as it dried, hinges screeched, windows fogged over with condensation. It wasn't rebuilding, it was birthing, the motel pulling itself back into the world through him. David stumbled backward, gasping, his ribs aching with every phantom footstep pacing inside him. His heartbeat no longer felt like his own. It matched the rhythm of the motel, steady, mechanical, unyielding. Room 6 yawned open at the center, its door crooked, the light spilling out pale and wet. The smell of mildew and rust poured from it, wrapping around him like chains. The brass key floated toward the doorway, glowing faintly, its tag flashing with finality. Tenant David Hale. He froze. His full name. He hadn't written that in the guest book, hadn't spoken it here, yet the motel knew it. It owned it. Anna appeared beside him suddenly, her form flickering, breaking apart at the edges. Her voice was urgent, sharp with panic. Listen to me. You still have one chance. Step through, and you'll become part of it forever. But if you resist, if you cut it off before the anchor takes hold... She reached for his chest, her translucent hand pressing against his sternum. Pain flared instantly, sharp and searing, as though her touch was burning the mark branded within him. David cried out, knees buckling. You'll lose something, Anna whispered, her voice breaking. Memories, maybe more. But you'll be free. That's the price. Behind them, the old man's voice thundered, rising from the motel's walls, deeper and darker than ever. No. He is ours. He signed. He stays. The doors around the lot slammed open, one after another. Figures poured out, blurred, faceless, stumbling toward him. Their mouths moved in unison, chanting his name, the sound growing into a roar. Anna pressed harder against his chest, her face contorted in pain. David, decide! Let them take you, or let me burn it out before it's too late! Room SIX's light pulsed brighter, stretching across the lot until it touched his shoes. The footsteps inside his body quickened, pounding harder against his ribs, demanding he step forward. The tag on the key blazed with a single, searing word. Enter. The chant of his name rattled through the lot, voices overlapping in a wave that shook the ground beneath his feet. The faceless figures staggered closer, their blurred features twitching as if trying to shape themselves into something recognizable. Faces from his past, people he had known, twisted by memory. Anna's hand pressed harder against his chest, heat searing through him like a brand. His vision swam as if she were reaching not for flesh, but for the mark etched into his soul. You can't fight both, she gasped, her form breaking into ribbons of light and shadow. If you step forward, you're gone. But if you let me burn it out, David, you'll lose pieces of yourself. Whole pieces. David's knees buckled. His mind screamed in defiance, but the pounding footsteps inside him were relentless, steady as a war drum. He felt room 6 pulling at his bones, urging him into its threshold. The light spilling from its doorway throbbed in time with his pulse, promising a sick kind of relief if he just gave in. The old man's voice bellowed from everywhere, shaking the air. He is ours. He chose. He signed. The chanting voices joined in, rising like a storm. David's eyes burned as tears blurred his vision. What would he lose if Anna scorched it out? His memories? His identity? Would he even be himself anymore, or just a hollow shell, free but broken? Anna's grip trembled, her voice fierce. Decide now, David. I can still burn it out, but only if you let me. Don't wait. Once you step through that door, there's no coming back. The light from room 6 stretched further, wrapping around his legs now, warm and suffocating. The chanting grew louder, pressing into his skull until he thought it might split. The tag on the key pulsed with one final command, each letter burning brighter than fire. Enter or erase. David screamed, caught between the two pulls, Anna's hand blazing at his chest, and the motel's light devouring him inch by inch. David's scream tore into the night air, ripped from him by the sheer pressure of the choice. Anna's blazing hand seared deeper into his chest, a fire that wasn't just heat but memory itself unraveling. He felt strands of his life fraying like threads. The pounding footsteps inside him thundered harder, urging surrender. The light of room 6 pulsed up his legs, a tide threatening to swallow him whole. Relief whispered from it, just step inside, no more fighting, no more loss. But Anna's voice cut through, fierce, breaking with desperation. Better a broken man than their prisoner forever. Let me burn it out. David clenched his jaw, veins standing out in his neck. With the last ounce of defiance he had left, he shouted, Do it! Anna cried out as her hand flared brighter, blinding white. Pain exploded through David's body, searing, shattering. His chest convulsed as though his very heartbeat had been set aflame. He fell to his knees, screaming, as images flashed violently through his mind, his childhood bedroom, the first girl he kissed, his college graduation, his mother's smile. Each memory seared, peeled away, gone before he could hold on to it. The chant of his name faltered, staggering into chaos. The faceless figures convulsed, their blurred forms unraveling into smoke. The doors of the motel slammed shut one by one, their hinges screeching in protest. The neon sign shattered in a spray of sparks, the buzzing silenced. The old man's roar split the night. No! He was ours! He signed. His voice fractured, collapsing into static before vanishing completely. The light from room 6 flickered violently, then collapsed inward like a dying star, imploding into darkness. The motel crumbled into dust, its last remnants carried away on a sudden, hollow wind. David fell face first onto the cracked asphalt. His vision swam, his ears ringing. Anna knelt beside him, her form flickering but clearer now than it had ever been. She cupped his face, her touch strangely gentle. You're free, she whispered. But the cost? David blinked at her, lips trembling. What? What did I lose? Anna's eyes filled with sorrow. She touched her hand to his cheek, and he realized he didn't know her name anymore. He didn't know his own. The key lay beside him, dark and inert. The tag was blank. For now. David woke to the sound of wind. Dry, whistling through weeds that poked through the cracks in the asphalt. His eyes burned. His body felt hollow. When he sat up, the lot was empty again, the sky pale and washed out like an old photograph. The motel was gone. Anna was gone. And when he reached for his memories, they slipped away like water through cupped hands. He couldn't remember where he was born. Couldn't recall the name of the street he grew up on. Even the faces of the people he loved blurred into nothing, smudged silhouettes. He pressed a hand to his chest. His heart still beat, but it felt slower, quieter, like it belonged to someone else. The key lay a few feet away, brass dull in the morning light. The plastic tag remained blank, smooth, innocent. David picked it up with trembling fingers, bracing himself for words to carve across its surface again. But nothing came. Not yet. He rose unsteadily, his legs weak. The highway stretched ahead, endless in both directions, no cars, no sound but the wind. The thought of walking filled him with dread, though he couldn't remember why. Only that something was waiting. Always waiting. Hours passed, he couldn't tell how many, as he stumbled along the road. His stomach cramped with hunger, his throat ached for water. When at last he saw a sign for a town, relief almost dropped him to his knees. Cedar Ridge, 2 miles. The letters on the sign were chipped, rust eating through the metal. But the name clawed at something buried deep in him, something he couldn't quite reach. He kept walking. When the town finally came into view, it was silent. Deserted. Storefronts stood empty, their windows smeared with dust. The diner was there, neon coffee cup dark. The gas station pumps rusted in place. Not a soul moved in the streets. He wandered through in a daze, the emptiness heavier than the motel itself. And then, from the corner of his eye, he saw it, his reflection in a broken window. He stopped cold. The face staring back wasn't his. Or rather, it was, but blurred, indistinct. Like one of the prisoners in the cars. The key grew hot in his hand. Words etched themselves onto the tag once more, slow and deliberate. Tenant confirmed. David staggered back from the shattered window, his pulse thundering in his ears. The reflection stared after him, his own face blurred like smeared paint, eyes hollow sockets that seemed to drink in the light. He lifted a trembling hand to his cheek. The reflection's movements lagged a beat behind, as though it belonged to someone else entirely. The key in his palm seared hotter, its weight unbearable. The words on the tag deepened, letters gouging themselves in black grooves. Tenant confirmed. Room 6, internal. David's breath caught. Internal. The motel wasn't outside anymore. It was in him. He dropped the key onto the cracked sidewalk, but the sound of it clattering echoed far too long, as though it had fallen into a deep well instead of onto concrete. The noise reverberated in his ribs. His chest tightened until he fell to his knees, gasping. And then he heard it again. Footsteps. Not above him now. Not around him. Inside. Pacing across the floorboards of a room within his chest, steady and patient. Every step scraped along his bones. David clutched his shirt, his fingernails tearing at the fabric, but there was no release. The sound would not stop. From the diner, a flicker of neon buzzed. The sign, dead moments ago, sputtered to life with a weak hum. The coffee cup glowed, casting a sickly green light onto the street. And from within, a voice called out, muffled through walls that shouldn't exist anymore. Room service. The reflection in the broken glass smiled with a mouth too wide. David stumbled back, but every window he passed showed the same distorted image, himself, blurred, warped, his face already part of the motel. The key clinked at his feet. Somehow, impossibly, it was back in his hand again. The tag's letters shifted once more, deliberate, merciless. Check-in complete. The footsteps in his chest quickened into a slow run. The rhythm of the footsteps inside David's chest grew heavier, faster, until every thud rattled his ribs. He staggered through Cedar Ridge's empty streets, clutching himself as if he could cage the sound in, stop it from spreading. But with each beat, he felt less like a man and more like a hallway, walls stretching within him, doors lining his veins. The neon diner sign buzzed brighter. A low hum spread through the street, and one by one, other lights flickered awake: hardware store, gas station, even a barbershop with a spinning pole that hadn't worked in decades. Cedar Ridge wasn't deserted anymore. It was reawakening. David fell to his knees, choking on the mildew rising from the air, thick and suffocating. The key in his hand pulsed once, twice, then vanished into his palm, absorbed like metal sinking into skin. His veins burned with heat, his fingertips twitching. The world tilted. Buildings warped, their walls bubbling with turquoise paint. Doors cracked open, lights spilling out. And from those doors, shapes stepped forth, blurred people, their movements jerky, their faces formless. They filled the sidewalks, the road, gathering in silence. Each one turned toward him. "Tenant," they whispered in unison, voices dry and hollow. David staggered to his feet, swaying. "No," he rasped, though his voice shook with doubt. "I burned the book. I freed you. I'm not." The crowd tilted their heads together, the sound of necks snapping in unison. "Tenant confirmed. Tenant confirmed." And then the world shifted again. Cedar Ridge stretched, warped, splitting open like a wound. The familiar rows of buildings collapsed inward, and in their place rose the turquoise facade of the Crosswind Motel. Room after room unfolded along the street, stretching farther than his eyes could follow. At the center, its door wide open, waited room 6. David's chest felt hollow. The footsteps weren't pacing anymore. They had stopped. Waiting. Inside him, a doorknob turned. The voices rose into a chant, shaking the air. "Tenant confirmed. Room 6 is ready." David screamed, clapping his hands over his ears, but the sound came from within. His reflection in every window around him, dozens of mirrors, all showing blurred faces, stepped forward, each opening its too wide mouth to laugh. The motel was no longer chasing him. It was wearing him. David's vision swam as the chant filled every corner of Cedar Ridge, rattling the bones in his body. He staggered back, clutching his chest, but it wasn't his chest anymore, it was a hallway. He could feel the walls, the peeling wallpaper, the sag of the ceiling beams. His ribs groaned like door frames. When he blinked, the street vanished. He wasn't outside anymore. He was standing in a long, dim corridor lined with doors, each one numbered, brass tags gleaming faintly in the sickly light. The air stank of mildew, and water dripped rhythmically from an unseen ceiling. The crosswind had moved inside him. His breath hitched. No, this isn't real. But his hands brushed the walls, rough with peeling paint. The floorboards beneath his shoes creaked, alive. From behind the doors, voices whispered, dozens, hundreds, murmuring his name, begging, pleading, weeping. Some laughed. Some pounded against the doors, shaking the hinges. One door groaned open slowly, its brass number crooked, 6. A pale light seeped from the crack, spilling across the warped carpet. The smell of damp earth thickened, clinging to his throat. The footsteps returned, not above him this time but ahead, inside room 6. Heavy, dragging back and forth. David gritted his teeth. If this is me now, then I still get a choice. He forced himself forward, every step agonizing. The hallway stretched, longer with each pace, the doors multiplying. Yet room 6 never drifted farther away. It waited, always the same distance, always open just a little wider. He reached the threshold. The room inside was exactly as he remembered it, the stiff bedspread, the crooked lamp buzzing, the windmill painting hanging askew. But now everything pulsed faintly, like it was breathing. On the bed sat the guest book. Whole. Unburned. Its pages fluttered though no air stirred, and then stopped on a fresh sheet. Ink bled up from the paper on its own, scrawling his name in jagged strokes. David Hale, permanent resident. His pulse roared in his ears. He wanted to rip the book apart, set it aflame again, but his hands shook violently. Anna's voice drifted faintly from somewhere down the corridor. "Don't touch it, David. Not this time. If you claim it, you seal yourself forever." The footsteps inside the room halted. The air thickened. And from the corner by the dresser, the old man's voice rasped, low and patient. "You've already signed." David's chest tightened as the old man's rasp slithered through the room. The shadows near the dresser shifted, thickened, until the man himself stepped into the pale glow. His cardigan still dripped as though freshly pulled from deep water, his black eyes swallowing the light. "You can fight the book," the old man said, his smile cracking wider. "But it will not matter. You are no guest anymore. You are the walls, the doors, the foundation." He tapped the bedpost with one finger, and David swore he felt the knock reverberate inside his ribs. "This place breathes because you do." David's gaze snapped back to the guest book. The ink still pulsed, his name scrawled across the page, dark and final. His hand twitched toward it, instinct tugging him closer, as though part of him longed for the relief of surrender. Anna's voice cut through, faint but fierce, drifting from the hallway beyond. "Don't let him trick you! The book isn't yours, it's theirs. If you claim it, you'll feed them forever. But if you destroy it from within..." Her words broke, fading into static, as though the motel itself was choking her off. The old man's grin widened. "She is bound to lies. She wants company. She wants you to rot beside her." David staggered closer to the book, his breaths ragged. He reached out, but his reflection in the glossy page made him stop cold. It wasn't his face anymore. It was blurred, hollow-eyed, one of the faceless figures from the cars. His pulse thundered. He could feel the motel tightening around him, waiting for his hand to close over the guestbook. The footsteps resumed in the room, pacing back and forth, as though impatient for his choice. The brass key materialized in his other hand, hot and sharp, its tag etched with a new command. "Sign or burn." David clenched his teeth, caught between two unbearable options. If he signed, he would anchor the motel within himself forever. If he burned it here, inside, what would it take from him this time? The old man leaned closer, whispering, "It is easier if you stop fighting." The guestbook's pages rustled, waiting. David's whole body trembled. The book pulsed on the bed like a living organ, the ink of his name slick and wet as though freshly written. Every breath he took echoed back at him, the room responding as if it were his lungs, his body. The brass key burned hotter in his hand, the words etched into the tag deepening until they glowed red. "Sign or burn." His mind reeled. If he signed, the fight ended. No more running, no more choices. But that wasn't freedom, it was surrender. If he burned it, he remembered the pain of Anna's touch, the searing loss, his memories ripped away like pages torn from a diary. What more could the fire strip from him now? Anna's voice pushed faintly through the static, weaker than before but resolute. "It will cost you, David. But freedom always costs. Burn it." The old man loomed closer, black water dripping from his cardigan, pooling at his feet. His grin cut wider, splitting the corners of his mouth. "You've given enough. Sign it and it ends. No more pain, no more fire. Only peace." But David had seen what peace looked like. The faceless figures trapped in cars, blurred and hollow. That wasn't rest. That was erasure. His chest heaved. With a guttural cry, he raised the brass key high, flame bursting from its tip like a struck match. The motel itself groaned in protest, the walls bending inward, the windmill painting rattling against the wall. He slammed the fire down onto the guestbook. The pages ignited instantly, screaming, as though hundreds of throats had been set alight. The fire spread, leaping across the bedspread, up the walls, devouring the room. The old man shrieked, his voice splitting into 1,000 howls. "You cannot unwrite what is yours!" The flame surged brighter, white-hot, filling David's vision. Agony tore through his chest as though every memory, every heartbeat was being carved out of him. He fell to his knees, clutching his skull as fragments of his life ripped free. Names, faces, entire years burning to ash. Anna's voice pierced through the roar, closer now, almost beside him. Hold on, David. Just a little longer. Let it all burn. The room collapsed inward, the ceiling falling, the walls crumbling. Through the fire, he saw shadows writhing, unraveling, fleeing into the blaze. The last thing he heard before the world went dark was the sound of footsteps, finally stopping. When David opened his eyes, the world was silent. He lay on his back in the middle of the cracked lot where the crosswind had once stood. No motel. No neon. No doors. Just dust, weeds, and the pale wash of dawn bleeding into the horizon. For the first time since he could remember, there were no footsteps. No pacing. No knocking. The quiet was so deep it made his ears ring. He pushed himself upright, every muscle aching. His chest throbbed as though a hole had been carved in it, but there was no mark, no wound, only emptiness. The brass key lay beside him. When he picked it up, it was cold, inert. The tag, scorched black, bore no words, no numbers. Just a melted blur. Relief flickered inside him, small, hesitant. He had done it. The book was gone, the motel burned from within. He was free. But then he tried to remember who he was. His name caught on his tongue, incomplete. His mind reached for memories, but they were ashes. He couldn't recall the faces of his parents, the sound of his own laugh, the places he had lived. All of it had burned with the book. What remained was a hollow man with fragments that meant nothing without context. He staggered to his feet and began walking. His legs carried him automatically down the highway, though he didn't know why or where. Each mile stretched empty, the road shimmering in the heat. Hours passed. A car appeared eventually, a dusty sedan approaching from the horizon. Relief surged in him. He waved his arms desperately, stumbling into the road. The car slowed, stopping a few feet away. The driver leaned out, a young woman in sunglasses. "Hey, you stranded? Need a ride?" The sight knocked the breath from him. He knew her face, though he didn't know how. His memories were gone, yet something in her voice hit him like déjà vu. He stepped closer. She smiled faintly. "You're lucky. Not many people come this way." His throat tightened. The brass key burned suddenly in his pocket. He pulled it out, still blackened, still scarred, yet words began to etch across the tag in fresh, gleaming letters. "Check-in available." The woman tilted her head. Her smile widened, just a little too far. David froze in the middle of the road, the brass key trembling in his hand. The letters carved into the tag glowed faintly in the morning light. "Check-in available." The woman in the sedan drummed her fingers against the wheel. "Well? You need a ride or not?" Her voice was light, casual, but beneath it was something else, something rehearsed. David's chest clenched. The footsteps weren't back, yet, but the silence around him was loaded, waiting. He glanced at her smile. Too neat. Too bright. He forced his voice through the dryness in his throat. Do you see this?" He held up the key. Her smile faltered for just a fraction of a second, then returned wider. "Of course," she said smoothly. "Everyone gets one." His stomach dropped. "Everyone." She leaned closer, resting her chin on the window frame. Her sunglasses slid just low enough to reveal her eyes, black, depthless, glinting faintly with water. David stumbled back. "You've been given a gift," she said, her voice softening into the rasp he knew too well. "You can build it again. From nothing. A new crosswind, not just a prison, but a home." The air thickened. The horizon shimmered. Behind the sedan, the outline of the motel flickered faintly, its turquoise walls already rising from the heat, its doors materializing one by one. "No," David whispered, shaking his head. "I burned it. It's gone." The woman chuckled. "You burned a book, not a promise. And promises don't end, David. They're rewritten." The key pulsed in his palm. New words etched into the tag. "Owner. The motel on the horizon steadied, its neon signs sparking to life. The Crosswind Motel, vacancy. David's knees weakened. He realized the truth, terrible and absolute. He hadn't destroyed the motel. He had only changed its keeper. Anna's faint voice drifted on the hot wind, sorrowful, fading. I told you there was always a cost. The woman in the sedan extended her hand toward him, her smile stretching impossibly wide. Welcome back, Mr. Hale. It's time to open for business. The words on the tag seared into David's vision, impossible to look away from. Owner. His hands shook as he clutched the key. The brass felt heavier than ever, so heavy it pulled at his arm, as though it wanted to drag him to the ground, to the motel already flickering into being on the horizon. The woman in the car, if she could even be called a woman anymore, watched him with patient eyes, black and bottomless. Her hand still rested casually on the wheel, but the other extended toward him, palm open, waiting. It won't fight you now, she said, her voice honey-sweet over the rasp beneath. You won't be a tenant. You'll be the keeper. You'll hold the doors. You'll hold the names. All those who wander in, lost, broken, desperate, will belong to you. David's stomach twisted. He staggered back, shaking his head. No. I freed them. I destroyed it. The motel's neon flickered harder in the distance, buzzing in sync with his pulse. Doors yawned open one by one, pale light seeping from them. From inside, whispers rose, hundreds of voices, crying out at once. Not just his name. Pleading. Begging. David, please. Let me out. David, don't leave me here. David, I'm still in the dark. His throat closed. These weren't strangers. He knew these voices, though the memories were ash. Fragments pressed against the hollow parts of his mind, the sound of laughter, a hand gripping his shoulder, a lullaby hummed softly. All erased when Anna had burned the book inside him. But the motel remembered. The woman's smile curved wider, the corners of her mouth tearing slightly, crimson leaking down her chin. Do you hear them? Pieces of you, David. All that was taken. They can be yours again. All of it. Every face. Every moment. Just open the doors. The key flared, burning his skin. New words carved themselves deep. Unlock. David's knees buckled. His chest felt like it was collapsing inward. The silence he had fought so hard to win, the end of footsteps, the end of knocking, was gone. Behind him, faint and patient, the sound returned. Slow. Heavy. Pacing within his ribs. The motel wasn't offering him ownership. It was commanding it. David's breath came ragged, his vision blurring as the weight of the motel pressed into him. Each footstep inside his ribs echoed louder, threatening to tear him apart if he resisted. His hand shook violently, the key burning like a coal, the word unlock pulsing brighter with each heartbeat. The motel on the horizon shimmered closer, no longer a ghost but almost solid. Its turquoise walls peeled and cracked, neon signs sparking with frantic life. Each room's door swung open wider, spilling a pale light across the highway. The voices grew louder, swelling into a storm. Some begged him to free them. Some cursed him. Others called out in tones sweet, familiar, fragments of the life he'd lost, dangling like bait. David, remember me. David, you left me. David, come home. He fell to his knees, clutching his chest. His heart no longer beat in his rhythm. It thudded in the motel's rhythm. The longer he resisted, the heavier the pressure became, as if the building itself was growing inside him, brick by brick, nailing doors into his bones. The woman in the sedan didn't move. Her hands still hung outstretched, her smile stretched too wide. The pain will end when you open the door. The sooner you accept, the sooner it becomes yours. Think of it, David. No more running. No more burning. You'll be the one holding the book. You'll decide who stays, who leaves. The temptation scraped at him. Power. Control. The chance to reclaim what he'd lost. But he remembered the blurred faces in the cars, the voices trapped in walls, the emptiness of being erased. That wasn't ownership. That was damnation. His gaze dropped to the key. Its glow was blinding now, words scorching into the tag until his skin blistered. Unlock! 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 With a scream, David slammed the key to the asphalt, smashing it with both fists. The brass cracked, then shattered into shards that hissed as they burned into the ground. The motel's neon flickered violently, sparking, fading. The woman's smile faltered, her black eyes narrowing into fury. "You fool!" she hissed, her voice layered, monstrous. "You cannot break what you are!" The shards of the key sank into the asphalt, vanishing as though devoured by the earth. And then silence. David gasped for air, chest heaving. The footsteps inside him had stopped again. He looked up. The motel had vanished. The horizon was empty. But when he glanced at his reflection in the sedan's window, his face was blurred. Hollow. Unfamiliar. The woman's voice slithered into his ear, though her lips never moved. "Every motel needs an innkeeper." David stumbled back from the sedan, bow rising in his throat. His reflection stared at him from the glass, blurred, shifting, the edges of his face smeared as though painted in water and left out in the rain. His mouth in the reflection moved on its own, shaping words he hadn't spoken. Tenant. Keeper. Innkeeper. He swung his fist at the window. The glass cracked but didn't shatter. The reflection splintered, fragmenting into dozens of versions of himself, each blurred, each hollow-eyed, laughing silently in unison. The woman in the driver's seat never flinched. Her hands remained on the wheel, nails long and black, drumming patiently. "It doesn't matter if you smash the key," she said, her voice layered with the motel's rasp. "It was never the brass. It was never the book. It was the signing. You made the choice the moment you wrote your name." David shook his head violently. "I burned it. I destroyed it. She cut him off with a sharp hiss. "You consented. That cannot be undone." The highway groaned. The ground beneath him cracked, black water seeping through, bubbling and hissing in the sun. He staggered back, nearly falling, as the asphalt rippled like it was turning liquid. From the fissures rose faint shapes, doors, warped and half-formed, glowing faintly before sinking again. The motel was still there, just beneath the surface, waiting to rise. The footsteps returned in his chest. Slow. Measured. Not pacing this time. Approaching. David gasped, clutching his sternum, as though he could bar the thing inside him from moving closer. His blurred reflection in the glass leaned forward, its grin stretching wider, impossibly wide. "You don't run a motel from the outside," the reflection whispered. Its voice was his own. "You run it from the inside." The woman's black eyes gleamed, her smile sharpening into something feral. "Time to check in, innkeeper." The fissures split wider. A single brass key rose from the bubbling asphalt, whole again, gleaming as though freshly polished. It hovered in the air before him, tag blank, waiting for him to hold it. David's breast shuddered. His hands itched to grab it, though every instinct screamed against it. And then, faint, almost lost beneath the roar of the motel returning, Anna's voice drifted to him like a dying echo. "Don't pick it up. Please, David, if you do, there's no leaving." The key hovered in the air, gleaming in the dim light as though it had never shattered. The brass gleamed with unnatural polish, its blank tag pulsing faintly like a heartbeat. The fissures in the asphalt hissed and bubbled beneath it, black water licking at the air. David stood frozen, chest heaving, as the footsteps inside him pressed harder, slow, inexorable, moving closer to the center of him. Every thud rattled his ribs, every step a demand. "Pick it up. Pick it up." Anna's voice drifted again, weak but urgent. "Don't. You'll anchor it through yourself. Once you take it, there's no fight left. You'll be the one holding the doors open." The woman in the sedan chuckled low, her black eyes glowing faintly. "She lies. You've been holding the doors since you signed. The key is not a chain, it is a crown. Without it, you are nothing but a vessel. With it, you are master." Her smile widened, splitting the corners of her mouth. "And don't you want your memories back?" David froze. The words cut into him like glass. Memories. He reached for them instinctively, but all he touched were ashes, fragments scattered too thin to hold. Faces blurred, names gone, whole years ripped away. The motel had devoured them. But maybe it hadn't destroyed them. Maybe it had only taken them. The reflection in the sedan window leaned close again, his own blurred face grinning back at him. His voice, whispered through the glass. "Take the key, David. Turn it. Every memory, every piece you lost, they're behind those doors. They're waiting for you." The tag flickered suddenly, letters searing into the blank surface. "Unlock yourself?" The footsteps inside his chest stopped. Waiting, holding their breath with him. David reached out, his fingers trembling inches from the floating brass. The air buzzed, heavy with anticipation. Anna's voice broke, filled with sorrow. "If you do this, you'll never walk away again." The woman in the car leaned forward, her voice dripping with satisfaction. "And if you don't, you'll wander hollow forever. Which would you rather be, lost or whole?" The key tilted in the air, turning toward him like it could sense his answer. David's trembling fingers hovered inches from the key. Its surface glowed faintly, the brass humming with a resonance that vibrated through his bones. His chest ached with emptiness, a cavern carved out by everything he had lost. Memories. The word itself felt like a knife. He wanted them back. His mother's smile, the sound of his own laugh, the comfort of a name spoken by someone who loved him. The motel had stolen all of it. But if they still existed behind those doors? The reflection in the sedan window leaned closer, grinning wider with his blurred face. "It's all there. Every second you gave up. Take the key, David. Turn it. Unlock yourself?" Anna's voice strained, breaking as though she were screaming through water. "Don't listen! Those aren't your memories anymore. They're bait. Take the key and you become the motel. You'll trap yourself forever." The footsteps inside his ribs shifted, closer, louder, as though pressing against the inside of his skin. Each step rattled through him, urging him forward. "Pick it up. Pick it up." David's hand closed. His fingertips brushed the brass. A surge of heat erupted, racing up his arm. His vision blurred. For an instant he saw them, flashes of life. His mother reading to him in a dim bedroom. A dog barking joyfully in a backyard he couldn't name. A kiss stolen under a bleacher. Laughter at a birthday cake. Whole years. Whole people. Himself. He gasped, tears stinging his eyes. "They're still there." The woman in the sedan smiled, her black eyes gleaming. "Yes. All yours. Just turn the key, and the motel will open them to you. Forever." The tag pulsed with fresh letters, each one searing into the plastic. "Claim ownership." Anna's voice cracked, raw with desperation. "David, please! They're not gifts, they're chains. Every memory is a door, and every door needs a tenant. You'll be their keeper, not yourself." The fissures in the asphalt widened. Pale turquoise light bled up through the cracks, turquoise walls already beginning to form, doors groaning on invisible hinges. The key hummed violently in his grip, demanding, pleading. David stood trembling, torn between reclaiming the life he'd lost, and sealing himself inside the very prison he had fought to destroy. The highway around David groaned as if it were alive, fissures splitting wider, turquoise light bleeding through the cracks. The outline of the Crosswind Motel flickered taller, stronger with every second he clutched the key. The brass seared his palm, the plastic tag burning with the words, "Claim ownership." His chest pounded, footsteps slamming from the inside of his ribs. They weren't urging anymore, they were demanding. Every step shouted in his blood, "Turn it, turn it, turn it." David's hand tightened, his breath coming ragged. Flashes of the life he'd lost burst in and out of his vision, his mother's laugh, a dog's wet nose pressing against his hand, the warm press of someone's lips against his. All so vivid, so close, like they were only a door away. The woman in the sedan leaned toward him, her smile splitting unnaturally wide, crimson at the corners of her mouth. "Take them back, David. Take yourself back. No more running. No more hollow silence." Her black eyes gleamed. "All it costs is staying." Anna's voice cut across the roar of the motel's return, thin and breaking like static, but burning with urgency. "If you claim it, you'll never leave. You'll be the one who knocks, the one who drags them in. Don't mistake bait for freedom." The fissures surged, vomiting black water across the highway. Doors rose from the asphalt, warped and dripping, their brass numbers gleaming faintly. Beyond them, blurred figures pressed against the glass of their own windows, pounding to be freed. Their voices rose in a desperate chorus. "David, let us out! David, don't leave me here! David, please!" His knees buckled. The weight of them crushed down on him. If he took the key, he could open every door. Free them. Free himself. Or so it promised. The reflection in the sedan window leaned closer, his own blurred face staring back. Its mouth stretched into an endless grin, whispering in his voice, "You're already the innkeeper. This just makes it official." The tag's words blazed brighter, each letter cutting into his palm like a knife. "Turn the key." David screamed, caught in the pull, Anna's pleas in one ear, the motel's promises in the other, the weight of memories clawing at the hollow places inside him. The key trembled, waiting. The key vibrated in David's grip, its brass teeth humming like machinery grinding awake. His arms shook with the weight of it, his whole body trembling as if every nerve inside him were wired into the motel's foundation. The tag pulsed furiously. Turn the key. The highway dissolved around him. Where there had been sky, there was ceiling, peeling turquoise paint. Where there had been cracked asphalt, there was carpet, damp and stained. The motel wasn't just outside anymore. It was him, folding itself over his body like a second skin. Anna's voice screamed through the static, fierce, desperate. "David! If you turn it, you're not freeing anyone, you're binding yourself to every soul still trapped. You'll be the book, the walls, the doors." The woman in the sedan stepped out, her legs long and spindly, joints bending wrong. Her skin rippled, dripping black water as she stalked closer. Her mouth smiled wide, impossibly wide. "And what's so wrong with that?" she purred. "A master. A keeper. The one they beg to. Better than a hollow ghost, wandering, forgotten." The footsteps inside David's chest thundered, running now, charging. His ribs ached as though the door inside him was about to burst open. His blurred reflection in every motel window stared back, grinning, chanting in unison. "Turn it! Turn it! Turn it!" His hand twisted. The key turned halfway. A blast of light tore through him, half a memory flooding back, bright and unbearable. He saw his mother in a kitchen, turning to smile at him, a birthday candle glowing on a cake. His chest swelled with joy so sharp it hurt. Then it was gone. The motel groaned with hunger. The doors lining the hallway inside him rattled violently, hinges straining, shadows pounding to be let out. Anna's voice ripped through, raw and desperate. "David! Stop! Let it burn with you! It can't live without a keeper. If you die holding it back, it dies too." Her words dropped into him like ice. Was that the real choice? Not turn, not claim, die with it. End it completely. The key flared white-hot in his grip. The command on the tag burned brighter, consuming the plastic entirely. Turn or fall. His body shook, sweat stinging his eyes. The motel's walls closed in. The voices screamed. The footsteps crashed against his bones. And David knew this was it. The final choice. David's lungs burned as though the motel itself had sucked the air out of him. The key rattled in his grip, begging to be turned, vibrating like it would splinter his bones if he resisted. The command seared across the tag, molten and absolute. Turn or fall. The turquoise walls stretched higher, doors slamming open and shut in a rhythm that matched the pounding inside his chest. Every voice, every blurred soul, screamed at once. Their cries shredded into a storm of sound that tore at his mind. Let us out, David! Claim us, David! Don't leave me, David! Each one was a hook tearing through him, threading into the hollow spaces where his memories used to live. The woman, no, the thing, that had stepped out of the sedan loomed over him, dripping water, mouth split to the jawline. Do it, she rasped, eyes glinting. Open the doors. Become what you were always meant to be. Anna's voice, faint but unyielding, cut through the roar. Don't give them what they want. You're stronger than this. End it, David, end it by ending yourself. His knees hit the ground. He was caught between them, the motel's hunger and Anna's plea. His hand twisted the key nearly to the final notch, his body betraying him. The pressure inside his chest was unbearable, like a door bursting to open, shadows clawing at the frame. And then a single thought pierced through the chaos. This isn't about me anymore. If he turned the key, the crosswind would live on, fed by every soul it tricked. If he let Anna burn him away, his life, his memories, what little was left, would vanish, but so would the motel. David clenched his jaw, tears searing his eyes. He tightened his grip on the key. Instead of turning it forward, he flipped it in his hand, pressing the jagged teeth against his chest. The motel screamed in fury, the walls shaking, the neon sign outside exploding in sparks. The woman's smile twisted into rage. No! You can't! David drove the key into his sternum. White fire erupted. His body arched, every nerve set alight. The doors inside him buckled, then collapsed inward, splintering into dust. The footsteps ceased. The voices cut off mid-scream. For the first time, silence reigned. As the world dissolved into light, David heard Anna's voice one last time, soft, almost a prayer. Thank you? Then everything went dark. Silence. It stretched endless, deeper than sleep, deeper than death. David floated in it, weightless, his body gone, his thoughts unraveling like threads in water. For a moment, he felt peace. No footsteps. No knocking. No motel pressing against his ribs. Just nothing. But nothing didn't last. A sound returned, faint, muffled, like a memory he hadn't asked for. A voice, small and uncertain. Hello? David opened his eyes. He was standing in a hallway. The carpet was damp. The turquoise paint curled from the walls. Brass numbers gleamed faintly on doors that stretched into darkness. The Crosswind Motel. No! His voice broke, ragged. I killed it! A door ahead creaked open. A boy stepped out, 10, maybe 11 years old. His clothes were dated, his skin pale, his eyes blurred at the edges. He clutched a toy car in his hand, its paint chipped. Are you the manager? The boy asked softly. David's chest seized. No. I'm not. But then his eyes dropped. In his hand was the brass key. Whole. Clean. Polished. Its tag bore fresh words in perfect, cruel clarity. Innkeeper. David staggered back, shaking his head. No, I chose to end it. I ended everything. The hallway groaned around him. Doors began to rattle, one after another, until the sound grew deafening. From behind them, voices rose, pleading, screaming, laughing. Hundreds. Thousands. The boy smiled faintly, his face blurring more. That's what they all say at first. David dropped the key. It clattered to the floor, echoing too long, too deep. But when he looked down, it was back in his hand. His name was already etched into the tag, glowing like fire. The lights overhead buzzed. The footsteps returned. Not inside him this time, around him. Pacing the corridor. Waiting for him to open the doors. David's legs buckled. He pressed his back against the wall, shaking. No. I can't. I won't. But the voices didn't stop. They grew louder, filling every corner of the motel inside him, until there was no silence left to hold on to. And the guest book lay open on the bed in room 6, waiting. The walls shuddered with each pounding knock from behind the doors, the corridor trembling like a beast breathing in its sleep. The brass key cut into David's palm, its tag glowing brighter, searing his skin with the word. Innkeeper. No, he whispered, his voice hoarse. I won't do it. I won't be you. But room SIX's door swung wide on its own, the pale light inside spilling out like an invitation. On the bed sat the guest book, restored pristine, its leather gleaming as though no flame had ever touched it. Pages fluttered until they stilled on a fresh sheet, blank except for a single line written in black ink. David Hale, innkeeper. His knees weakened. His name was already there. He hadn't written it. He hadn't chosen this. But the motel had chosen him. The boy with the toy car stood just outside room 6, tilting his head. His blurred face strained as though trying to form features. It doesn't matter if you don't want it. The doors don't open without someone to hold the keys. David shook his head violently. I burned it. I killed it. The boy's mouth stretched into a smile too wide for his small face. You only killed yourself. That's how the motel survives. The words struck like ice. His sacrifice hadn't destroyed the crosswind. It had only completed the cycle, binding him tighter. The hallway extended in both directions, endless rows of doors rattling, begging. Each one whispered, muffled voices clawing at the cracks. David, let me out. David, please, I've been waiting. David, don't leave me here. The footsteps surrounded him now, circling, closing in. His blurred reflection grinned at him from the brass numbers, from the glossy floor, from every shimmer of glass. Anna's voice tried to reach him, faint, almost broken. Don't open them. Whatever happens, don't open them. But the boy stepped closer, pressing the toy car into David's free hand. The weight of it was familiar, like something from a memory he couldn't quite grasp. The boy's blurred face tilted up toward him. Please, innkeeper, he said softly. It's your job. The guest book's page shimmered, a pen rolling into the crease, waiting for his hand. The motel groaned, alive, starving. David's chest constricted as the pen rolled slowly across the open page of the guest book, stopping neatly at the blank line beneath his name. The faint scratching of 1,000 unseen hands echoed through the walls, urging him, coaxing him. Sign them in. Sign them in. Sign them in. The boy with the toy car stood close, staring up with his blurred, shifting face. His small hand pressed insistently against David's arm, urging him toward room 6. It won't stop until you do it. That's how it works. That's how it always works. David's throat burned. No. I'm not doing this. I won't. The boy's smile flickered, collapsing into a blank stare. His voice deepened suddenly, layered with dozens of others, too large for his small frame. You don't get to decide. You are the doors. The hall shook violently. Brass numbers rattled against wood as every door in the corridor slammed in unison, bang, 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 before creaking open just an inch. Pale fingers reached through cracks, scratching at the frames, leaving gouges in the peeling turquoise paint. The pen twitched on the page. David clenched the toy car in one hand, the key in the other. Both burned with impossible weight. I didn't choose this, he said through gritted teeth. The boy tilted his head. His face blurred, then sharpened for the first time, becoming clearer. Brown hair, freckles, wide eyes filled with fear. For just a moment, he looked achingly human. Neither did we, he whispered. The footsteps began again, pounding the hallway, circling David from every direction. His blurred reflection appeared in every brass number, every glossy surface, mouths grinning too wide, chanting in perfect unison. Innkeeper. 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 The guest book's ink bled across the page, filling lines on its own. New names wrote themselves beneath his, each one appearing in frantic, jagged strokes. The boy's name surfaced first. Then dozens more, spilling down the paper faster than David could follow. The book pulsed. The motel demanded. And the key in his hand etched fresh words onto its tag, cruel and final. Begin check-in. The words on the tag seared into David's vision. Begin check-in. The hall pulsed with anticipation, doors rattling against their frames, brass numbers clinking like teeth. The whispers from behind them grew sharper, clearer, more desperate, voices clawing for recognition. "David, I'm cold. David, I can't breathe. David, please let me out." The boy clutched his toy car to his chest and stepped back toward room 6, his blurred face sharpening and distorting with every flicker of the buzzing overhead light. His small voice carried the weight of command. "They're waiting, innkeeper. Open the first door." David shook his head violently, pressing his back against the peeling wall. "No. I won't. I burned the book. I ended this." The boy's blurred features stretched into a grin too wide for his young face. "The book wasn't the motel. It never was. It was just the ledger. You are the binding now. Every step, every scream, every name, they all live in you. And they need doors." The guest book on the bed pulsed like a living organ, pages flipping wildly before stilling on the fresh list of names. The ink shimmered, one entry glowing brighter than the rest. Elias Ward, room 11. David's breath caught. Ward. Anna's name. A thread tugged at the hollow place in his memory, a connection he couldn't see but felt in his bones. The door at the far end of the corridor creaked. Brass number 11. Its knob twisted on its own, opening just a fraction. A pale hand pressed against the frame from the inside, trembling. The boy pointed, his voice sharper now, layered with countless echoes. "Start there." The footsteps returned, pounding behind David, in front of him, above him, below him. The motel itself was closing in, pressing him toward room 11. The key in his hand flared white-hot. The tag burned with new words, final and merciless. "Unlock room 11." David's knees weakened. His chest rattled with every step echoing in his ribs. The pale hand at the crack of the door clawed desperately, nails leaving bloody streaks down the turquoise paint. The motel demanded he open it. The key pulsed in David's hand like a living vein, its heat rising in waves up his arm, threatening to fuse into his bones. The words on the tag gleamed with sickly light. "Unlock room 11." The hallway stretched impossibly long in front of him, turquoise walls peeling like dead skin, the carpet squelching under his feet as if soaked in water. Each door rattled violently, brass knobs twisting, wood buckling. Behind them the voices rose into a storm, pleading, screaming, laughing. They knew the ritual as well as he did. They had been here longer. But room 11 was different. Its door didn't just rattle, it shuddered, groaning like something larger than a person was pressing against it from inside. The pale hand clawing at the frame wasn't blurred like the others. It was detailed, human, trembling with desperate effort. Blood streaked down the turquoise paint as nails split and tore. David's legs carried him forward despite his mind's resistance. The motel moved him like a puppet, each footstep dragging in time with the pounding in his chest. His heart no longer felt like his own. Every beat belonged to the motel, and every echo pushed him closer to the glowing brass number 11. The boy with the toy car followed behind, padding along softly, his blurred face reforming each time David dared glance at him. One moment human, the next monstrous, then hollow again. His voice was calm, almost gentle. "This one has been waiting a long time. It will feel good to let him out." David's throat tightened. "Elias Ward," he whispered, tasting the name as though it belonged to someone he should know. The guest book had written it first. "Ward." Anna's voice echoed in his head, "Don't open them." But what if Elias was tied to her? What if freeing him freed her? He stopped before the door. The knob twitched, jerking violently, and the voice inside called his name. Not blurred. Not broken. His name, sharp and whole. "David. Please. It's me. Let me out." The motel's walls shook. The key burned hotter. The tag blazed. "Unlock now." David's hand trembled over the knob. David's hand hovered over the knob of room 11, trembling so hard he could hear the rattle of the brass. The tag on the key flared with molten letters, each pulse syncing with his pounding chest. "Unlock now." The pale hand inside clawed harder, bloody smears streaking down the turquoise paint. The voice that followed made David's stomach clench. "David, it's Elias. Anna's brother. She told me you'd come. Please. You freed her, didn't you? Now free me." The boy's toy car clicked as he rolled it between his palms, watching from behind. His blurred face shifted in the flicker of the buzzing light, sometimes a child's, sometimes something hollow and faceless. "He's telling the truth. Anna's been waiting for him. You'll be doing good by opening this door." David swallowed hard, 1,000 doubts swirling. He remembered Anna's desperate warning, "Don't open them. Whatever happens, don't open them." Yet here, Elias's voice was so human, so alive. Not blurred, not warped. Real. "David," Elias begged, his tone breaking. "I've been trapped for so long. You freed her, didn't you? Don't leave me here. Please, please." The other doors grew louder, voices pounding from behind them, desperate to drown him in chaos. They weren't calling for freedom. They were mocking him, chanting his name, jeering at his hesitation. But room 11 stood apart, every word a plea that cut through the noise. The boy tilted his head, voice calm. "This is what you are now, innkeeper. Not a prisoner. Not a victim. You choose. You give release." David gritted his teeth. "And if it's a trick?" The boy's grin spread wide, unnatural. "Then it's your trick. That's the point." The doorknob jerked violently under David's palm, hot as though it burned from within. The footsteps in his chest marched forward, crashing against his ribs, demanding. The guest book behind him glowed, Elias Ward's name pulsing on the page, ink dripping like blood. The motel screamed in unison, rattling the corridor with one word etched into his skull. "Open." David's fingers closed on the knob. The knob burned in David's grip, branding his palm with its heat. His knees buckled under the motel's pressure, every door along the corridor rattling in rhythm, chanting the same word in unison. "Open! Open! Open!" Elias's voice pressed against the crack in the door, raw and breaking. "You don't understand what it's like in here, David. The dark never ends. It eats at you until you're not a person anymore. Please, don't let me disappear." David's breath hitched. His thoughts tumbled in chaos. What if Anna's warning wasn't about him? What if it was about everyone else? But Elias was different. The connection between the names tugged at him, sharp and undeniable. Behind him, the boy's toy car scraped along the wall with a grating sound, his blurred face sharpening into the image of a child David almost recognized. Brown hair, wide eyes, freckles. Innocence warped by an expression that was far too calm for the chaos around them. "This is your duty," the boy said softly. "Some deserve release. Some don't. You will learn the difference. But you must begin." The walls groaned, turquoise paint cracking, flakes falling like dead skin. The carpet beneath David's feet squelched, black water seeping up and soaking his shoes. The motel was losing patience. The key in his other hand screamed hot, the tag etching words so deep they split the plastic. "Unlock room 11. David's heart raced. If this was a trap, opening the door could doom him. But if it wasn't, if Elias truly was tied to Anna, what right did he have to leave him imprisoned? His fingers tightened. The knob twisted. The door swung inward with a groan. Light exploded outward, blinding, searing his eyes. A rush of icy air slammed into him, knocking him backward onto the soaked carpet. He gasped, clutching his chest as the temperature plummeted, his breath fogging instantly. And from the doorway, a figure emerged. Not blurred. Not hollow. A man, gaunt and pale, eyes wide with a desperation that was painfully human. "David," he whispered, stumbling into the hall. "Thank you." Elias collapsed to his knees in the hallway, coughing violently, his bony shoulders shaking with each breath. The air around him steamed with frost, the corridor dripping as though the temperature had plunged below freezing. David scrambled back against the wall, chest heaving, eyes locked on the man. Elias wasn't blurred like the others. His face was sharp, real, sunken cheeks, stubble along his jaw, blood crusted under his fingernails from clawing at the door. But his eyes were black-rimmed, hollow with a depth that spoke of years, maybe decades, inside. The boy with the toy car stopped rolling it, crouching low to watch Elias with childlike curiosity. His blurred face sharpened just enough to reveal a smile. "See? You can free them. You just have to choose." Elias lifted his head. Tears streaked his pale skin, his lips trembling. "Anna, did you see her? Is she safe?" The name cut through David like glass. His throat tightened. I think so. I freed her. Or, I thought I did." Elias's eyes closed in relief. His hands gripped the damp carpet, knuckles white. "She was all I had left. If she's free, then..." His voice cracked, splintering into a sob. David's chest ached, a fragment of his stolen humanity flickering back to life at the sound. For the first time since this nightmare began, he felt like he had done something right. But the motel didn't agree. The walls convulsed, doors slamming shut in a thunderous wave. The ceiling groaned as if the entire corridor were alive, furious. The key in David's hand blazed white, letters searing across the tag in jagged fury. "Unauthorized release." The guest book on the bed snapped shut, slamming like a judge's gavel. Elias's name glowed faintly through the leather cover, the ink twisting, warping. The boy stood slowly, toy car dangling from his fingers, his voice flat now. "You weren't supposed to start with him." Elias staggered upright, gripping David's arm, his nails digging into flesh. His voice was hoarse, frantic. "Don't let them take me back. Please, please don't let them." The hallway roared with voices, furious and deafening. Every door rattled at once, brass numbers glowing like coals. The motel wasn't finished, and Elias had been pulled out without its permission. The corridors shook like the bones of some enormous beast. Every door slammed in rhythm, each impact rattling David's chest. The brass numbers glowed blood-red, spilling light into the damp hallway. Elias clutched his arm harder, his grip bruising, eyes wide with terror. "It's angry. You don't understand. You weren't supposed to open mine first. You've broken its order." David's voice cracked. "Then tell me, what happens now?" Before Elias could answer, the walls split open. Black water poured from the seams, flooding the hallway in seconds. The air stank of mold and rot. From the water rose hands, pale, blurred, faceless, clawing at Elias, dragging at his clothes, pulling him toward the ground. He screamed, thrashing, nails tearing into David's skin. "Don't let them take me back! Please! You said Anna's free, don't let me!" The boy stepped closer, the toy car dangling loosely from his hand. His blurred face twisted into something ancient, far older than a child. "This is why you follow the order. The motel feeds on balance. You give it what it wants, or it takes it back, harder." David yanked at Elias, pulling against the watery hands. The cold stung his skin, needles of ice driving into his veins. His arms shook with effort, the motel's weight dragging both of them down. The key in his hand pulsed violently, hotter than fire now, the tag etching new words across the plastic. "Return tenant." David's jaw locked, fury bubbling against the fear. "No. I won't." The boy tilted his head, his voice smooth, almost kind. "Then it will return both of you." The water surged higher, waist-deep now, waves slamming against the walls. Elias's screams cracked into sobs, his strength fading. "David, please! I can't go back. Not after this." David's muscles burned as he fought, but the key in his palm seared deeper, sinking into his skin as though it wanted to fuse there. The words brightened, commanding him like law. "Return tenant." But his other hand still clutched Elias, knuckles white, refusing to let go. The motel roared. The doors burst open, and something larger began to step out. The doors burst open with a deafening crack. Water gushed out in torrents, surging down the corridor, carrying with it the blurred forms of tenants who had been trapped too long. They stumbled into the hallway, faceless and shambling, their movements jerky, as though pulled by invisible strings. But behind them came something worse. From room 6, the air thickened with a low, grinding sound, like wood splintering and nails tearing from beams. The turquoise paint bubbled, cracked, and peeled away in strips. Out of the doorway crawled a figure unlike the others, an enforcer. Its limbs were too long, joints bending backward, its hands sharp as broken glass. Its head hung too low, chin grazing its chest, but its mouth stretched wide, splitting ear to ear. No eyes, only a gaping black cavity that dripped with water. The motel's fury had taken form. The boy's blurred face sharpened briefly into a grin. "Now you've done it!" Elias thrashed harder, his fingernails digging bloody crescents into David's arm. "Don't let it take me! It'll lock me deeper this time. I won't come back. Please!" David's chest heaved. The water dragged at his legs, pulling him down, freezing him to the bone. The enforcer's steps echoed across the hallway like hammers striking iron, each footfall rattling the doors and their frames. The faceless figures parted for it, pressing against the walls as if even they feared its touch. The key in David's palm pulsed so hot it blistered his skin. The tag screamed with light, new words carving themselves deep, absolute. "Surrender, tenant!" David roared through clenched teeth, yanking Elias upward, refusing. "No! I won't let you take him!" The enforcer tilted its head. Its jaw split wider, water gushing from its mouth as it spoke in the motel's layered, booming voice. "You do not choose. You serve." It reached for Elias with claws that sliced through the damp air. David had seconds. Either obey the motel and surrender Elias, or defy it and face the enforcer head-on. The enforcer's claws slashed through the air, spraying black water in violent arcs. David yanked Elias backward, stumbling as the surge of liquid nearly swept them both off their feet. The water was up to his waist now, icy and churning, filled with blurred hands that clawed at his legs. The enforcer loomed closer, its eyeless face turning toward him, mouth stretching wide enough to split its jaw. A howl tore out of its throat, layered with the voices of everyone David had heard since the motel claimed him. The sound rattled the walls, cracking brass numbers from the doors. The boy stood calmly in the rising water, toy car still in hand. His blurred face was placid, almost bored. "You can't win this fight. It was written the moment you opened 11. Give him back, David. That's what an innkeeper does." David's chest burned with rage. "No! That's what a jailer does. I'm not you. I'm not this place." The key in his palm pulsed furiously, the tag glowing with one brutal command. "Surrender, tenant." His body screamed to obey, his fingers twitching against Elias's arm. But another voice pushed through, faint yet piercing, Anna's. "You freed me because you chose to. Remember that. Choice is the only weapon you have." The enforcer lunged. David shoved Elias behind him and raised the key like a weapon. It blazed, fire erupting from its brass teeth, the heat so intense it turned the water to steam. The enforcer recoiled with a screech, its mouth snapping shut. David plunged forward, slashing the key across the thing's arm. The brass teeth tore through its dripping flesh like fabric, black water spraying as the limb crumbled away. The enforcer shrieked, staggering backward, but the motel roared in fury, every door slamming open and shut in chaos. The blurred figures wailed, pressing against David with icy hands, but he swung the burning key in wide arcs, each strike searing them into smoke. His throat tore from screaming. "You don't own him! You don't own any of us!" Elias clung to his shoulder, sobbing, shaking, but alive. The enforcer staggered, water pouring from its wounds, before collapsing into the flood. The motel howled, the sound of 1,000 doors slamming at once. David stood panting, trembling, the key blazing in his hand. He had defied it. But the guest book behind him opened on its own, the ink writhing, Elias's name glowing red before twisting violently into new letters. Forfeit claimed. The flood receded as suddenly as it had come, the black water draining into cracks in the floor until the carpet sagged, soaked and reeking of rot. The faceless figures melted into the walls, leaving only the boy, Elias, and David standing in the ruined corridor. David clutched Elias, his chest heaving, the key still blazing hot in his hand. He had won, for now. But then the guest book slammed shut with a thunderous crack. The sound reverberated through the corridor like a verdict. The book flipped open again of its own accord, its pages fluttering violently until they stopped. Elias's name glowed, the ink writhing, twisting. 2 words burned themselves across the paper. Forfeit claimed. Elias stiffened in David's grip. His body convulsed, his eyes going wide, black veins spreading from his pupils. No, no, please! His voice broke into a scream as his skin cracked like porcelain, light spilling from within. Elias! David shouted, shaking him. Stay with me! But the motel had made its choice. Elias wasn't being dragged back into room 11, he was being consumed. His body split in jagged seams, glowing fissures racing across his frame. His screams grew shrill, distorted, layered with static. The boy tilted his head, toy car dangling from loose fingers. You shouldn't have freed him first. Now the motel takes him another way. A deeper way. David's stomach twisted. What does that mean? The boy smiled faintly. He won't go back in a room. He'll become one. Elias's body ruptured in a blinding flash, and when David's vision cleared, room 11 was gone. In its place, a new door stood in the corridor. Fresh wood. Brass polished. Its number gleamed 113. From behind it came Elias's voice, warped, broken. David, help me! David staggered back, horror crushing his chest. The motel had rewritten him, punishment for David's defiance. The key burned hotter than ever, the tag carving new words into itself. The order is law. The boy's blurred face sharpened into something cruel. Lesson 1, innkeeper, you can't cheat the book. David stared at the new door. The number gleamed so brightly it hurt to look at. 113. It hadn't been there before. The corridor had stretched endlessly, but he knew its numbers, he had walked past them all. The motel had created this one, carved it from Elias's screams, his body, his soul. From behind the door came the pounding. Not the dull knocks of the other tenants, but fists hammering, frantic and human. David! Don't leave me in here! Please, I can hear them whispering. They're in the walls, don't. His cries choked off, replaced by sobbing. The sound bled through the cracks in the turquoise paint, seeping down the door like condensation. David stumbled forward, hand shaking as he reached for the knob. The key pulsed violently in his other palm, the tag flashing with burning words. Do not open. The boy with the toy car walked closer, his small feet splashing in the last puddles of black water. His blurred face flickered again, this time stopping on something that looked cruelly familiar, Anna's mouth, Anna's eyes, before distorting again into nothing. Now you see, he said softly. You defy the order, and the motel rewrites it. Elias Ward no longer exists. He is room 113 now. That's all he'll ever be. David's throat burned. I freed him. I fought for him. You stole him. The boy interrupted sharply. Not from me. From the book. You don't get to steal, innkeeper. You only serve. The pounding behind the door grew louder, Elias's voice breaking. David! Please, I don't want to be a room. I don't. The door vibrated violently, the brass knob twisting. The motel shuddered around them, impatient, furious. The tag on the key seared again, its new words cruel and final. Room sealed. The pounding cut off instantly. Silence. David collapsed against the wall, his chest hollow, shaking so hard he could barely breathe. The boy crouched, rolling the toy car idly against the soaked carpet. Now you understand. There are no rescues here. No second chances. Only tenants. Only rooms. He looked up, blurred face grinning. And you will open them. One by one. Until the hall is full. David slid down the wall, his body trembling, his hands still clamped around the burning key. The brass teeth were etched into his palm, as if the metal had fused with his flesh. He wanted to throw it away, to be rid of it, but he already knew the truth: it would always return. The corridor stretched endlessly before him, doors rattling in hungry rhythm. Each one hummed with a voice, each one called his name, each one demanded he open. The motel didn't need to convince him anymore. The order was set, the book already written. Behind him, room 113 stood silent now. No more pounding. No more voice. Elias was gone, erased, his fate sealed in wood and brass. David's heart cracked under the weight of it. Anna's warning, Elias's begging, his own defiance, all of it had ended in the same inevitability. The boy knelt beside him, rolling the toy car across the soaked carpet, his blurred face shimmering. "You fought hard," he said, voice calm, almost gentle. "But it doesn't matter. It never matters. The crosswind doesn't end. It only changes its innkeeper." David forced himself to look up at him, anger flaring weakly through his despair. "Why me? Why not someone else? Why did it choose me?" The boy tilted his head. His face flickered into David's own, blurred, warped, stretched into a mockery of recognition. "Because you signed." The words cut through him like ice. He remembered the guest book, his name scrawled in ink that moved on its own. He had thought it a trap, a trick. But it hadn't been a trick. It had been a contract. The boy rose to his feet, toy car clutched in his fist. "Come, innkeeper. The guests are waiting." The doors groaned, opening just enough for pale light to leak out. The voices grew louder, crying, laughing, begging, mocking. David pressed the back of his head against the wall, his eyes burning. For a brief moment he thought of the outside world, the highway, the open sky, the silence of nothing. He wondered if that world was still there at all. The key pulsed again, branding its final words into the tag. "Begin check-in." David closed his eyes. The footsteps resumed, steady, endless, pacing just ahead of him in the hall. And then, with a shudder, he stood. The doors waited.